The Noble Lady is bringing together a number of different issues, but the essence is, do we need high-quality degrees in this country that are accessible, particularly to those from disadvantaged backgrounds? There are areas we have clear concerns. We've already expressed our concerns publicly about foundation years and reduce the funding for classroom-based subjects and also regarding franchise provision.
My Lords, that concludes oral questions for today. A short interlude to allow members who wish to leave before I call Lord Bragg. Motion for debate, the contribution of the arts to the economy and society. Lord Bragg.
Yeah. I'd like to move that the House takes note of the contribution to the arts in this country. The creative arts generate more revenue than the life sciences, aerospace and the construction industries combined. Add the input from television, films, advertising and broadcasting, and we are faced not with a charming, marginal activity, but with an industry, ready to grow to the massive benefit of this country, commercially, educationally, and equally in areas such as health and social equity. First of all, though, the arts industry needs a radical overhaul. At present, it's dangerously patchy and punching way below its weight. Last year, there were over 3 million job roles in the creative and cultural industries. And there could be more if we recognise and reached the full potential of what is still considered too often to be the cherry on the cake. The arts are not the cherry on the cake, they are the cake. It's the opportunity this society needs to reform itself, to replenish all parts and pockets, to stem the slide to the bottom of just about any listing that appears. It's an open goal. There's no doubt that this country could build itself up through a cultivation of the arts, through a determination to release its energies and take on the mantle, this is not too fanciful, I think, of other places and other times, Athens, Florence and others, which have transformed their societies through the arts. Why can't we? We have the skills. What we need is the vision and the will. We need to think of the arts as an industry, a new industry, which it is. What we have to build on deserves attention and often praise. Cities which have imploded, especially in the north, because of the government abandonment and investors seeing no future beyond the stock market. I'll take 3. Newcastle, Gateshead, Combine, Leeds, and above all Manchester, have regrouped and found profit from their engagement with the arts, and this goes for similar smaller venues too. Keswick in Cumbria, middle-sized cities such as Bath, towns like Cheltenham. In many places, the arts have reinvented and magnetised dying conurbations. But still, this doesn't provide the fundamental requirement, which is to engineer a deep change which will be universal. But to get to the best, we need to take a close look at the worst. Recently, the Times chief cultural correspondent, Richard Morrison, said, "British theatre is dying and in a dreadful state. Its demise hastened by the dominance of television and streaming. Those theatres not facing closure because of local authority budget cuts are struggling to attract audiences for anything except musicals and famous plays featuring famous actors. National Theatre Wales has lost its subsidy from the Arts Council of Wales. Creative Scotland has received a big cut from the Scottish Government. An all-party report from the House of Lords Committee last June commented that the current government policy towards the sector is, quote, complacent and risks jeopardising its commercial potential. It's strange that though over the past decade, the creative industries have grown at 1.5 times the rate of the wider economy, they've contributed billions of pounds of business, activity and exports, but again and again, these profits drain away, and the only begetter, the arts, is left stranded on overdrafts. This is at least unfair, and most blind to the power and potential of the arts. When they built the first steam engine, they didn't say, OK, we can do it, we'll stop now. They went on to create a network here and abroad with brilliant non-university workforce. Why do we stop here now in this country when it loses its theatres, its music, its dance? We are sleepwalking into permanent mediocrity, and cultural institutions, once the guardians of the arts, have in crucial cases become accessories to this deterioration. The Arts Council, for example, set up in 1948, in those flagship years of public service, has been of the greatest value for the arts, especially its arm's-length management. Yet, in November 2022, English National Opera was given 24 hours notice by Arts Council England that all current funding would be withdrawn and the company removed from the national portfolio by April 2023. This to a company approaching a century of often outstanding work, opera in English, free ticket schemes for young people, 51% of audiences first-time bookers, a world-class infrastructure. The way in which this was done disgraced the government. Nadine Dorries, the Culture Secretary, instructed, in a short letter, she used the word several times, Nicholas Serota, Chairman of the Arts Council, to do as the government, i.e. Nadine Dorries, dictated. We had become, it seems, a state-run arts country, one step away from the dictatorship of the state on the agenda. Without being rude, what on earth was she playing at? Who did she think she was? Why did the government back her? Dr. Harry Brunches, Chairman of ENO, fought it, and eventually the government shifted its ultimatum back a few years. But what on earth's going on? ENO makes a profit, just as importantly as it makes a mark on the future of opera in this country. The magnificent Royal Opera House is incomprehensibly besieged by not dissimilar troubles. Ms. Dorries didn't stop there. She threatened the reviewing of the BBC licence fee by 2027 in such terms that the BBC knew it would have crumbled, a policy which seems to have been adopted by her successor. So far, the BBC has stood firm. We'll see what happens in the media debate. The finest cultural institution in this country is the BBC. Classical music would be bereft without it. From the promise of the new composers, music of all genres is given airtime. BBC drama on television has pulled in some of the most memorable work over the generations, as have discussions and features on the radio. In the broadest sense, BBC Radio is a tailor-made embroidery of our tastes, aspirations and intellectual achievements. And then there's the World Service of the BBC, surely our greatest ambassador. From the diurnal to the most distinguished, the BBC defines the range and ambition of our society. Yet the BBC is under constant attack from those who envy it and want to capture its audiences, not to make better programmes. There's to be a debate on the media in your Lordship's House quite soon, and I trust that this House will develop some themes which are brought out today and come out emphatically to leave the BBC unweakened. The key word is education, to change the society thoroughly. I think this can lead us to a new state of the arts. I owe much of the next passage to the composer Howard Goodall. In the last century, there were the county music services, free instrumental lessons, Saturday morning music schools, orchestras, choirs. After 2020, these services were transferred into hubs, a private enterprise model. The local authorities lost responsibility for them, and the slide began. In 2022, the number of hubs was reduced nationally from 116 to 43, in direct contradiction to consultations saying that this would be the worst possible option for state schools. The 43 hubs had to do the same work as the 116 and on the same money. The uptake in GCSE music has dropped from 50,000 entrants in 2009 to 29,000 in 2022. Consequently, staff numbers in music and other arts have dropped dramatically. Baroness Featherstone, in her excellent speech on the depletion of support for the performing arts, references this, pointing out, I quote, "The decline in teachers of dance, drama and music and in teaching hours and provision in the curriculum is disgraceful." Quote, "There's no support for small music venues which are closing down at the rate of 1 a week. Mr. Sunak promised assistance, but none has arrived yet." End of quote. Howard Goodall writes that what has happened to music education in the past 13 years is a seismic reconfiguration. He continues, "The Conservative agenda has been driven through the Arts Council. The Conservative agenda being driven through the Arts Council seems to be to let classroom music die out in state schools. The Department of Education met only 27% of its target for newly trained music teachers last year." In 2008, under a Labour government, a programme was funded that revived group singing in 97% of all primary schools in the country, with a verifiable increase in discipline, attendance and work in classrooms. Music mattered. It lit the frame. The scheme was dropped. Why can't the 93% of children in our state schools receive the same musical offering that the 7% in private schools take for granted? This is shocking, unfair and wrong. It's just wrong. And what a waste. Just imagine what talent could be released, what benefits would flow were not only music but all of the arts given a chance to be part of the engine of growth in a country which would use its proven assets, talent, flair, cultural enterprise to grow to its full potential. And of course this needs more investment. And of course this needs rescuing from the doldrums. But look at the way we're wasting money at the moment. We're squandering it. And what enormous rewards could follow from building up the arts. So let's again look at the Industrial Revolution, the greatest revolution, I would say, that the world has ever seen. Why don't we have an Industrial Revolution for the arts? It's possible. And finally, Professor Daisy Fancourt has just delivered a book to be published first in America. If ever utterly conclusive proof were required for the benefits of the arts in our society, here it is. She's nailed it. Quote, "In 2018, the World Health Organization reported that after 3,500 studies, it had cast iron evidence of the deep and widespread health improvements which came from the teaching and the arts, from neurological disorders to child development. Cohort studies have shown that tens of thousands of people of all ages benefit physically, emotionally and intellectually by going to galleries, by dance and singing in choirs." End of quote. I won't club you with statistics at this stage, but the evidence of the connection between the art and intellectual health has now been conclusively made. We have scientific proof that art exercises the imagination and feeds us in positive, unique and lasting ways. We can't afford to ignore this. We can no longer just going on to cut, stint, cancel, slash. If we're to bring up generations whose minds and feelings are moulded by the best work, good teachers, multiple opportunities, then we could indeed make a brave new world. Why not? And why not start now? I beg to move.
Yeah. The question is this motion be agreed to.
Agree to it. My Lords, it's a great pleasure to follow the noble Lord Bragg, who has given so much to the arts over so many years. May I briefly declare my interests as a trustee of Tate, chairman of the Marlow Film Studios, and a cultural broadcaster on Times Radio, broadcasting from the South Bank, but not quite to the same level as Lord Bragg. My Lords, the funding for the arts in this country is not actually insubstantial. If you take the direct grants to museums, the grants through the Arts Council, the BBC itself, the tax credits which extend from film through to theatre and museums, and of course university funding and local authority funding, although I accept that local authority funding is under intense pressure at the moment. And also I think this government deserves a great deal of credit for the support it gave to the arts throughout COVID. The noble Lord, my noble friend Lord Mendoza, is not in the chamber today, but he and ministers worked tirelessly to ensure that the arts were supported. Nevertheless, it won't surprise your lordships to learn that I think we can still give more. I take a very simple view that the arts budget is effectively a rounding error in terms of what government spends across the piece. It could be increased substantially for the arts, insignificantly for what government spends overall, and it would make a difference. And my thesis has always been that the government should decide effectively what its national champions are, its national museums, the flagship theatres, not just those in London but around the country, fund them properly and securely and long term, but not to such an extent that it stifles their creativity and enterprise and their philanthropic needs, but certainly to ensure that they don't have to keep looking over their shoulders about whether they can keep the roof on. That, to me, is what one would call a no-brainer. At Tate, for example, we haven't lost our ambition. Tate Liverpool is going through its first major refurbishment for 40 years. Tate St Ives has acquired the Palais de Danse in St Ives, where Barbara Hepworth made her sculptures. We're building a new storage centre which will be open to the public in a very deprived area of London. So please help these national institutions match their ambition. I noted that the noble Lord focused on the economic impact of the arts, and there's no doubt at all that the arts and the creative industries are some of our most successful industries. And their wider impact has also to be taken into account. I don't really like these terrible economic reports which say that every pound you spend on the arts you get £500 back. I think they're nonsense. But we are world leaders, and that we have huge impact in health, education, criminal justice and soft power. But the arts are the venture capital for really successful industries like our film industry, our television industry, our video games industry. Marlowe Film Studios couldn't exist if it wasn't for the incredible talent that exists through this country's heritage in television and film. But Marlowe Film Studios may not exist because of the chronic and appalling planning system which exists in this country. And it's appalling if you look at the planning guidance that exists in this country, where cultural heritage and cultural assets come even behind Wetherspoon pubs. And the sooner we put cultural assets and heritage at the heart of our planning system and speed up our planning system, the better. Finally, I think it's important in the arts. I do love the system that we have in the UK, what we call the three-legged stool: core government funding, enterprise and creativity, and philanthropy. And it's important to acknowledge all the people that make that happen and to say thank you. Thank you to the people who work in the arts, who work for salaries that are far lower than their talents deserve or what they could receive outside. Thank you to the philanthropists who give so generously, two of whom are in the chamber with us today. Thank you to business. And yes, thank you BP for your grant to the British Museum. And finally, of course, thank you to Lord Parkinson for being such an excellent arts minister and for the hard work and devotion he gives to his job as a servant to the community that he works for.
Yeah.
My Lords, it is truly an honour to be speaking in the debate opened by my noble friend, Lord Bragg. And I, of course, probably like many noble lords, am a devotee of In Our Time and a great fan of the noble lord's books. I intend to follow the noble lord's speech and talk about our arts and creative industries' place in the education and development of our young people and the generations who will take this wonderful heritage forward, we hope, into a prosperous future. I was inspired to make this the subject of my short time to speak today by a recent visit to the National Theatre. I was treated to a tour behind the scenes and the stages, which I thoroughly enjoyed, particularly, I have to say, the wardrobe department. And I really appreciated the challenges that the National Theatre faces today. But I also learned of the extensive programme of education, learning, teacher support, training and apprenticeships, which is on offer at our National Theatre. For example, they run a scheme called New Views. It's a year-long in-school playwriting programme for students aged 14 to 19. Each school is paired with a professional playwright who supports students to write their own original 30 minutes plays, one of which will be performed on the stage in the National Theatre. But, my lords, it is, of course, a struggle to keep that going under the current circumstances. And also thank you to the Royal Shakespeare Company for their briefing, which tells us that they have 30 long-term regional partnerships made up of 280 schools and 15 regional theatres, all of these in areas of disadvantage. And they say, I quote, "Talent and potential are everywhere, but opportunity isn't." And I would hate to see that that was threatened and didn't thrive. And the Roundhouse, near where I live in Camden, offers a huge range of poetry, music and performing arts for local schools and children. But we have to raise the money in those schools, and I do in my local school, to ensure that our children can go there. My lords, where I grew up in Bradford, it's the first art gallery I ever visited, Cartwright Hall. And we visited this as children, and nobody ever stopped us from running around in it, which I think was probably very enlightened of the keepers there. And many decades later, I took my granddaughter there last year to their half-term arts activity, put on by the gallery for the local children in Manningham, which is one of our most deprived areas in the country. And my lord, St George's Hall in Bradford has been the Yorkshire home to the Halley Orchestra, and that last year, which was its 155th music season. I went from my comprehensive to their concerts from school. The tickets today for school students are, I'm happy to say, £5 each, but we have to actually raise the money for those children to be able to attend. My lords, a huge favourite in our family is the Wonder Lab at the Science Museum, and I can see many, many school children go there. It has a sister museum in Bradford, the National Science and Media Museum. They're doing Back to Space as their trip for their half-term holidays. I think we will be in London this half-term because we only get a day off, so I think probably my family and I will be going to the British Museum, but to their wonderful and extensive programme of learning and family activities. And or we might take advantage of the amazing offerings of the National Trust. Quite why this government has made a perverse ideological decision to focus on culture wars and target our fantastic and wonderful national treasure, which is the National Trust, is a complete mystery to me. I mention these places and these programmes not just because I love them, because they are a very small number of examples of the richness of our arts and cultural heritage. And the theatres, galleries, museums and community arts projects are absolutely vital as an investment in the future and sustainability and prosperity of this sector. We neglect it at our peril. Labour's vision is that every single person, no matter where they live or who they are, has the opportunity to create and consume excellent art and culture.
My Lord, we are indebted to the noble Lord Bragg for securing this necessary debate. Necessary because, notwithstanding the Minister's undoubted love of the arts and the money secured during COVID, we find ourselves currently in the midst of a crisis largely brought about by ill-considered decisions whose ramifications reach deep into the cultural fabric of our society. Should we make a special case for the arts? Yes, on so many levels. The return they bring to our economy, to our well-being, and to our standing in the world. Out of deference to Lord Bragg's own gifts, let me start with literature. Books are provided, as indeed they should be, for those detained at His Majesty's pleasure. However, in areas of deprivation like Haringey, primary school libraries, I'm reliably informed, have bare shelves compared to our prisons. That is shocking. Now, the Minister might say that this is a matter for the Department of Education, but I would suggest that it falls well within the area of our debate today, because if young children do not have sufficient access to reading, what chance do they have of becoming literate and ultimately potential writers, an area where we are world leaders? It is this failing at its most basic educational level that so worries me, whether it be literature or music, art or drama. Yes, there's been some improvement in music in schools, but essentially most state schools, as opposed to private ones, are miserably catered for. Hardly any peripatetic teaching and often a dearth of instruments. The DOE admit that there are recruitment problems in this area. Perhaps local performances provide exposure and opportunity. Sadly not. As we've just heard, in 2023, more than one venue a week in the UK closed permanently. And we know now that it's not just the very young for whom exposure to music is beneficial. Research published this week shows how it benefits older people too. In fact, engaging in music throughout your life is associated with better brain health, according to the new study published by experts at the University of Exeter. And noble lords advancing in age may like to know that they found if you continue to play the piano into great old age, your brain will benefit enormously. My lords, a few weeks ago, and here I should mention my interests as listed in the register, I was working with the BBC singers and was amazed by their legendary ability to sight-read new scores. The fact that the axe was poised over their heads because of the cuts the BBC has been forced to make by government was shocking, as was the ill-thought-out and nonsensical Arts Council cuts to the London Sinfonietta, the Britten Sinfonia and ENO. I concede that there was mismanagement in the past, but in recent years the ENO has fulfilled its outreach ambitions and the bringing in of a young audience. The fact that the music director, Martin Brabbins, felt it necessary to resign over cuts to these musicians is a matter for which we should all feel shame. Sheku Kane-Mason, on the other hand, is a young musician for whom we can all feel pride. But his family say that they would not now have prospered in the current provision of music in schools. When Sheku dared to gently suggest that Land of Hope and Glory made him feel uncomfortable, he was subjected to racial abuse. And when I supported him by recalling that Elgar himself hated the jingoism attached to a piece originally written purely for orchestra, I too received abusive comments. Here at least, in our condemnation of that sort of behaviour, of racism, I suspect the Minister and I will be as one.
My Lords, I'm very pleased to follow Lord Berkeley, who continues to delight us musically and in every other way. My Lords, we take the arts for granted. I therefore warmly thank my noble friend Lord Bragg, who has done more than just about anyone else to demystify and popularise the arts in our country. That certainly matters, because he is giving us a very timely, prompt, a spur to awareness, to overcome our collective complacency. And I don't mean this House, I mean the whole of the nation. Creativity in the arts and sciences, often fused in technology, is the sustainable raw material of modern times. We now need exploration and innovation as the means of maintaining life itself. Of course, they need funding, and philanthropy is therefore invaluable. But society, certainly civilized society, should not depend on charitable largesse, especially when public investment in the arts magnetizes and enables private investment. It pulls in rather than crowding out. Public funding for creativity is therefore essential for the human spirit and for community cohesion and pride. But crucially, the arts are also an economic cornucopia. Using a definition of the arts that is more narrow than that employed by DCMS, last November's McKinsey report on the direct economic impact of UK arts shows that in 2022 there were 139,000 arts enterprises and 63,000 voluntary arts organisations. 95% of those professional enterprises were sole traders or small businesses. The other 5% included the BBC, which is the biggest single employer of musicians in the whole of the United Kingdom. The arts employed 970,000 people, including 350,000 self-employed. generated revenues of £140 billion, tax receipts of over £50 billion, and gross value added of £49 billion. My Lords, local authority provision is essential and a very substantial component of those totals, a keystone in the cultural arch. But with £20 billion worth of cuts in central funding since 2010, councils everywhere, as the House knows, have pared back all non-statutory provision. The effects on creative activities have been severe and, in some cases, ruinous. My Lord, such cuts in central funding are gross, short-sighted and counterproductive socially, educationally and economically. They impoverish lives, communities and the future. They inhibit individual opportunity, stunt aspiration, diminish global Britain. Despite that, so many creative people still valiantly respond to the adversity of cuts as a challenge to fresh inventiveness rather than a defeat. They give so much more than they take. I wish them well, and I want them to know that while they are certainly underfunded, they are valued and not forgotten. A creative compact with the arts will come with a Labour government, and the sooner the better.
My Lords, I too am grateful to the noble Lord Bragg for securing this debate, and I'm particularly glad that we're not just debating the contribution of the arts to finance and the economy, but also to society. The arts are absolutely fundamental to human flourishing, to expanding our imaginations, to deepening our sympathies, to touching all aspects of our lives that so often the merely financial fails to engage with. Of course, the arts do make a significant contribution to the wealth of this nation, and we're fortunate to be home to some of the world's leading orchestras and musicians, playwrights and theatres, artists and galleries. In Hertfordshire, in my own diocese, there's a rapid expansion in the studios which are attracting filmmakers from around the world. It's important. But the danger is we don't give enough time and attention to thinking, where are these musicians and artists going to come from? Where are they first going to get the experience of the arts? Where are the ordinary people in their homes and their families engaging with the sheer delight of creativity? That's why I find it so deeply sad that many young people don't have the access to artistic expression or musical education in their communities, their homes, or sadly sometimes even in their schools. As I go round the communities in Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire, I note in many of our villages the only place now where there's any communal singing left is in the church. What was once a bigger part of communal life is dwindling. But the music and arts aren't just for professionals. They should be accessible to all, and this really matters. I've spoken in the past in this chamber about the way that many of the UK's composers, including Vaughan Williams, Elgar, Howells, Taverner, Rutter, began their musical careers because they were caught up in local music making in their churches. Without this opportunity, many of them may never have touched the artistic part of their lives and developed their skills. There are also a significant number of contemporary musicians who started out in local, sometimes church choirs, such as Ed Sheeran, Annie Lennox, Chris Martin of Coldplay. The Royal Church School of Music is just one example of an organisation which is working at grassroots right across our country, bringing the joy of music making to so many others who wouldn't experience it, for example, through their Voice for Life course. In my own diocese, the St Albans Chorister Outreach Project has worked with over 80 primary schools and given thousands of primary school-aged children the opportunity to participate in and enjoy singing. The National School Singing Programme run by the Roman Catholic Church has already expanded into 27 of Britain's 32 Catholic dioceses, reaching more than 17,000 children in 175 schools. My lords, none of this is funded by the state. In some limited cases, all that is needed to get it going is some limited seed cord funding. Yet in the face of financial pressures, those very modest amounts of money have been renewed, which has enabled people to get going, to give them a life experience of the joy of music, of art, and set them off in a career, many of them, which has been such a blessing to many people. So my question to the Noble Lord the Minister is, will His Majesty's Government take a fresh look at how we're funding, not just, of course, the big flagship art projects, but actually ensuring that we've got modest amounts of money to try and release the arts amongst a much wider group of people in our nation?
My Lords, last November, as we heard from Lord Kinnock, McKinsey published an arts report describing the UK as a cultural powerhouse punching above its weight globally with a dynamic ecosystem of multi-purpose talent. I thank my noble friend Lord Bragg, a true multi-talent, for initiating this debate. I also mention my own interests, particularly in book publishing, as set out in the Register. The creative industries significantly grow our economy, as we heard from Lord Bragg, and the civic contribution of the arts improves our health, well-being and happiness. Creative learning inspires children's inquisitiveness, persistence, collaboration, imagination and self-esteem. The arts encourage social cohesion and lower crime, which is perhaps why all 18-year-olds in Germany are given a €200 culture pass for cultural events, books or music. But a third key impact of the arts is soft power and international reputation. British writers are some of the top-grossing global film franchises of all time. J.R. Tolkien, Ian Fleming, J.K. Rowling. And today, Alistair Gray's novel, Poor Things, has clocked up 11 Oscar nominations, and Martin Amis's Zone of Interest 5. The BBC World Service is listened to by 318 million people weekly, and the British Council engages with 650 million annually. The Royal College of Art and UAL are ranked number 1 and number 2 globally for art and design. Other countries revere, invest and showcase their creative successes, but not us. The BBC, an admired global brand, sits at the heart of our connected creative industries, a trusted provider of news and our largest commissioner of entertainment. But instead of nurturing it, we freeze their income for 2 years. We engineer a 30% decrease in funding since 2010 and give them a below-average inflation rise at the end of it. With the arts declining by 40% at GCSE, no government plan to improve literacy, oracy, creativity and music in schools, together with the downgrading of humanities at university, I fail to see how we keep a pipeline of talent. The destruction of our arts ecosystem began in 2010 with austerity cuts. Local authorities, traditionally the largest investors in culture, suffered a 40% real-term core funding cut over 10 years, with libraries, local theatres, museums and public art the first to go, making a mockery of the levelling up agenda. Meanwhile, as referred to by Lord Berkeley, an astonishing 1 in 7 primary schools do not have a library. It would cost 14 million to correct that, and if all children in the UK read for pleasure, the UK's GDP would be up by 4.6 billion over a generation. By contrast, France's primary schools devote 10% of their time to the arts. All secondary schools have a cultural coordinator and art history is compulsory up to 16 years of age. 20 years ago, South Korea decided to invest in the arts, and it is now the 7th largest creative cluster in the world. They increased funding by 14% last year and put 500 million into a public-private VC fund for the arts. The film Parasite won over 300 awards and 4 Oscars. Squid Games, K-pop and the Hallyu wave have powered growth of other local industries, from food to cosmetics to tourism, which is why British creative leaders are all travelling to Seoul. My lords, we did lead the world creatively and should have aspirations to do so again. We still have the creative talent, but not the policies or the funding for our cultural industries to flourish at the heart of a growth strategy. We fail to recognise the innovation the arts initiate when coupled with science and technology. We make it difficult for our cultural activities to tour, to export, to be discovered. This has to change. We must invest in the power of art and our creative industries, which brings us such pride and recognition globally.
My Lords, it's a great pleasure to contribute to Lord Bragg's debate on the arts. As the wonderful Darren Henley has said, England's artists, arts organisations, museums and libraries enrich our lives, increase our knowledge and open our minds to new possibilities. Not only are they life-affirming, they contribute around 126 billion in gross value to the economy and employ some 2.4 million people, so value for money and good for us too. I declare an interest in a son-in-law, John Rolfe, who is a talented television and radio comedy producer, whose son, Tom Rolfe, has already had leading roles in local musicals with his amazing singing voice. Their skills have brought pleasure to many and continue to do so. How important both music and comedy are to our well-being. I used to sing and play the piano, and after Lord Berkeley's exhortation, I will perhaps try and do better in future. But, my Lords, it's enormously challenging for those talented in the arts to be recognised and to be employed to use those talents. It's a cutthroat business, severely damaged by Brexit and the pandemic. In many areas, artists struggle to survive, even when highly skilled, highly talented, and very real assets to our national life. The noble Lord Bragg has a highly distinguished career in the arts. In our time, always makes fascinating listening. I know a whole lot more about the Hanseatic League listening this morning than I ever thought possible. And age, of course, is no barrier to achievement, as we see from amazing octogenarians, nonagenarians, and even centenarians who are still contributing their artistic talents to our enjoyment. And as Lord Bragg said so eloquently, the BBC is a national treasure if ever there was one. We can see a significant contribution to education as well as enjoyment. They have the BBC Bite-Size programme, their flagship educational website, and BBC Teach with resources for teachers and students alike. We know, my Lords, that the government is pressed for money with health, education, housing, all vying for well-deserved, eye-watering amounts if our people are to be housed, cared for and educated to the standards which we would all wish to see in one of the wealthiest countries in the world. But the arts too need proper support if they are to continue to be world-beating and economically advantageous. As one fascinated by heritage arts and crafts, I congratulate the Minister on the part he has played in ensuring that the government will at long last be ratifying the UNESCO Convention on Intangible Cultural Heritage. Thank you, Minister. We hear that since Brexit, teaching, lecturing, exhibiting, entering competitions, and importantly, trade with the EU for our brilliant craftsmen and women has virtually ceased, which obviously affects the contribution of crafts to the economy. So can I ask the Minister what provision the government will make to ensure that the skills of our arts and crafts people will be supported to ensure that the UK can continue to hold its place as a creative centre in the world? And what plans does the government have to ensure that music, drama, dance, art are taught in all schools, as various other noble lords have already identified? There has been a woeful shortfall in recent years, to ensure that the next generation have every opportunity to use their artistic talents to the benefit of the economy, but also to the enjoyment of us all.
My Lords, I shall come to my noble friend Lord Bragg later. I remind the House of my current and past interests, including as a former Executive Director of the National Theatre and a former Deputy Chair of the Board of the Royal Shakespeare Company. And I would ask the House if it would be so good as to take it as read that I agree with everything, or virtually everything, which has been said so far, and I anticipate agreeing with most of what's going to be said after I've sat down. So I'm going to strive not to repeat any of it. I want to talk slightly differently about why I think the arts matter, not for their economic impacts, but which we've heard a lot, important as those are, nor because studying music, for example, improves our math skills, which they do, which it does, but for the power the arts have to change us and thereby to change the world. In the New Statesman last month, the journalist Anna Leszkiewicz wrote, and I quote, "In narrating this injustice with empathy, immediacy and urgency, television drama has succeeded where journalism has failed. The series has invited the average person to step inside the experience of Bates and so many others, to feel the iron walls of bureaucracy closing in on them, and to take on their panic and powerlessness. It is an extraordinary and rare example of a piece of drama not just capturing but creating a national moment." End of quote. The only word I disagree with her there, my lord, with is rare. She was, of course, talking about Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. And after it was broadcast, there was widespread confusion. How did this happen? How did this drama come to have such an impact? Well, my lords, the hard-won experience and skill of researchers, producers, designers, a remarkable writer and director, a peerless group of actors, and many more, took us into the minds of others, obliging us to confront experience we do not have and perspectives other than our own. This is how a drama about the Post Office succeeded in altering the course of events, where so much excellent previous research and journalism, upon which, of course, the drama relied, could not. All of us watching gained knowledge, certainly, but much more importantly, we gained insight. Our imaginations were engaged, and we felt the iron walls of bureaucracy, the panic and the powerlessness closing in on us, and we were moved. That is what art and artists can do. Link us to each other, remind us of our common vulnerabilities, and help us to make sense of an often chaotic world. My lords, human beings need stories. It's how they learn. They need to hear them, and they need to tell them. Art, in all its many forms, is how stories are shared. This is why encouragement of creative thinking should be central to any well-balanced school curriculum. Education cannot be just about acquiring knowledge, important as that is. It must also be about learning to process that knowledge, to challenge it thoughtfully, and to use it imaginatively. Thank you. My lords, we live in a dangerous world, angry, frightened, and divided. The power of the arts to help us navigate it has never been more needed. We must protect and nourish them. And now I come to my noble friend Lord Bragg, who has probably, my lords, done more than anybody alive in his extraordinary career to protect and nourish them. And I hope I won't embarrass him by saying that I think he is a true national treasure. But more importantly to all of us, my lords, he is an inspiring colleague and has been for many years. How very lucky we are to have him.
That's right. Yeah.
My lords, I too begin by congratulating Lord Bragg and thanking him for introducing this fascinating subject with great eloquence and passion. Thank you. I want to do two things really. The first point is the question, what are arts? The question that we are debating is this: what is the contribution of the arts to the economy and society? And that raises two questions, arts and contribution. And I want to say something about both of these. When we talk about arts, and we have done this for a long time, I'm not entirely sure what we mean by it. For example, if somebody were to say sport and art, is cricket an art, billiard an art, what would one say? And if one was silenced by Mrs. Thatcher, who is interrogating us, what would be our answer to the question, and what is snooker's contribution, or what is cricket's contribution to the economy, or to society? So I think the first thing to do is to be clear about the arts. Since I can't do this here, I would do this in my classroom. I would simply say art refers to an imaginative reconstruction of an object or an activity. You take an object and you put your imprint on it, and through that imprint you make it a distinctively your object, which can give a lot of pleasure to others. The next question is far more important, which is contribution. Now, art's contribution can be at many levels. You produce millions of DVDs and sell them, and you can say this is art's contribution. But is this what we are interested in? We are interested in art's contribution which is distinctive to art, which is not just incidental to art, but intrinsic to art. Art can't be imagined without those contributions. And those contributions cannot be imagined from any other activity than art in any society. So I want to concentrate, because I think it's very important, concentrate on what are the distinctive contributions of art to any society. Without that, it's not really worth living in. And I want to point to 5 contributions that art makes. First, it gives you self-knowledge. It gives to a society some understanding of what it is, what are the deeper forces working within it, what are the deeper contradictions, and gives the society self-knowledge. Secondly, it points out the defects of society in a very intelligent and meaningful kind of way. It has its own way, not by lecturing, saying you are doing this, rather by subtly getting under your skin and pointing out to you what is the defect needs to be rectified. That's why, for example, Cathy Go Home or Mr. Bates made this enormous impact. And you ask yourself, but this thing has been going on for all these years. Didn't it move anybody? Why did it have to wait so long until the program of 45 minutes come along? That's what art does. It can rattle you. And if you ask millions of people who saw it and were influenced by it, and you ask them, when you saw the program, tell us, why were you moved? What moved you? And they will tell you all kinds of answers which will be referred to the internal mechanism of the human mind which the art was able to touch. The third thing that art does is it creates a community. A novelist, for example, represents characters from different communities, introduces them to each other. So that I don't know how a worker lives his life, but reading Dickens or anyone else, I begin to get a picture of how that person works. And fourthly and finally, what Toni Morrison calls, an art is my access to me. Then it is through art, as she says again, it is an entrance into my own inner life. That it is by reading about art and about people like me, I begin to understand myself. Now what more self-knowledge can there be than art? Religion is supposed to be the source of knowledge. God alone knows us and tells us that whether God exists or whether he tells us what we are, artist certainly does. He holds a mirror to ourselves and gives us some idea of who we are. A society lucky with its artists is a society which has a great contribution to make.
My Lords, I'm delighted to speak in this important debate obtained by Lord Bragg, whose status as a national treasure I'm delighted to endorse, reminding all of us, not least the government, of the importance of the arts. And I'm going to focus on music and its contribution to society. So many of the events that define us as a society have music at their heart. Hatches, matches and dispatches all feature music. We sang some splendid hymns at Lord Judge's moving Thanksgiving service last week. Music figures at national occasions such as the Coronation, Trooping the Colour, Remembrance Sunday. Music festivals, whether pop, rock, jazz or classical, are important to many of us, as are Eisteddfodau in Wales. We express our affiliations to our country or our religion or our football team in songs and anthems. And where would we be without our choirs, orchestras and ensembles, including the Parliament Choir, my own contribution to which may or may not qualify as artistic. We even learnt this week that singing or playing music might help to ward off dementia. I share Lady McIntosh's agreement with everything that's been said so far and probably that will be said, and I'll just highlight 2 challenges facing music, both of which have already been mentioned. Last week I attended an event hosted by the Music Venue Trust, representing grassroots music venues across the UK, and was shocked to learn, as we've heard, that the number of such venues shrank by more than 1 a week in 2023, 42% of these closures resulting from financial problems. The Trust does a great job of making music available locally through such music venues, but much more help is needed both nationally and locally. So I hope the Minister might consider what steps the government could take to ensure a more sustainable ownership and business model for grassroots music venues, and possibly might he consider a ticket levy with tickets for large-scale music events, including a small contribution towards supporting grassroots venues. And there are other actions government might look at, such as reducing the burden of VAT or business rates on small venues. My Lords, as we've heard, music education raises even greater concerns. The number of pupils taking music GCSEs and A-levels has been steadily declining. Art and creative subjects are excluded from the 5 EBAC subject groups, causing some schools to drop them altogether, particularly, as we've heard, state schools. The Independent Society of Musicians highlights a teacher recruitment and retention crisis. Targets for recruiting music teachers have been missed, and some schools may have to rely on non-specialist teachers or none at all. As Lord Bragg told us, the local music education hubs set up under the original National Plan for Music Education have been consistently underfunded and are currently preoccupied with a major reorganisation to reduce their number from almost 120 to 43, and will still be underfunded. So how does the government intend to assure that the excellent aims of the refreshed national plan, led by the noble lady Baroness Fleet, who's unable to be with us today, will be met for the benefit of children across the country? What will the Minister do to blow the trumpet for music education and sing the praises of all those who contribute to it, so that music's absolutely vital contribution to our society is sustained into the future? Without music education, the music could stop. So come on, Minister, we recognise your personal commitment. You've got an excellent and ambitious plan to work with. Why not give it a bit more willy?
My Lords, if everybody agrees with everybody, I wonder where that leaves the Minister. But I want to just work on one theme just for a couple of minutes, and that's rural life. Governments of all parties, to be honest, ignore rural life in the UK. The word rural has not crossed anybody's lips. It came close with the Bishop's speech. But this goes for the big arts funders as well. I live in Ludlow. It's the case that citizens there cannot even get home from events in Shrewsbury and Hereford, 30 miles away, using public transport. So we're on our own. I declare an interest that Helen Hughes, aka Lady Rooker, was the pro bono chief executive of Ludlow Assembly Rooms for 8 years after we were disowned by the Arts Council of England. It contains a 300-seat auditorium, recently rebuilt to modern standards, mainly run with over 100 volunteers. Events can be streamed from London, New York, and a mixture of film, live shows, and international streaming for thousands of people, including those with dementia and other impairments not catered for by the big battalions of the arts. These are examples of what's offered. But the base funding is crucial to help provide the infrastructure for such small organisations. They, in turn, are crucial for artists to develop their craft. Often people come to a 300-seat rural enterprise to test events for bigger auditorium later on. Funders want innovation, while small organisations need core funding to stay ongoing. Now, we are 10 miles from the Welsh border. Annual performances by Mid Wales Opera fill the auditorium. Recently, Beatrice and Benedict packed the place out. Mid Wales Opera ensures that nobody in Wales and the Marches is more than 30 miles from professional opera throughout its touring programme, together with the outstanding works it undertakes in schools, providing an education programme that gives massive benefits to so many young people. But now, Arts Council Wales, in its wisdom, has cut the support to this innovating company to zero. They just don't care. And that's the problem. Rural arts need more support and more attention.
Well done, Joe.
My Lords, as ever, it's a great honour to follow the noble Lord Rooker, who puts his finger on a very important issue. But I would like to return to the issue of the role that the arts plays in activism and campaigning, and what the Right Reverend Prelate Bishop of St Albans called deepening sympathy. Because I think the arts can engage us in a way that 1,000 worthy leaflets or an informed speech simply doesn't. And the Lady Mackintosh of Hudnall really laid that out when she was talking about Mr. Bates and the post office. It did take an ITV drama to focus the nation's attention in a way that 2 decades of campaigning led up to, but really hadn't been able to focus anybody's attention on it sufficiently. I am amazed how the scriptwriter Gwyneth Hughes managed to so brilliantly condense all of that into a drama. The other gut-wrenching example of a brilliant and powerful play that I've seen in the last year was Prima Facie, which was Susie Miller's brilliant play, which starred Jodie Comer. That play examined a brilliant, hard-working woman who gets crushed between misogyny and the rules of a game devised out with the reality of women's experience. A very different genre would be Ai Weiwei's recent exhibition at the Design Museum. Again, very thought-provoking, and he's an example of an absolute master of stating tragedy with great subtlety and addressing immense issues in an original and striking way, and I think we're very lucky to have him living in this country. At the moment, I'm reading the book Prophet Song by Paul Lynch, and I appreciate he's an Irish writer, and the Irish, of course, do support the arts rather better than we do in this country. But it rightly won the Booker Prize, and it chillingly portrays the little steps it takes to descend into a totalitarian state. The removal of sympathy, the lessening of empathy as it seeped away from people, from neighbours, from work colleagues and even family, until the state, working in the resulting fear and isolation, takes total control. It's a very chilling book and I can thoroughly recommend it. Of course, Paula Rigo changed a whole nation's attitude to abortion through her series of paintings, as the then President of Portugal acknowledged. So I think that the power of art to change society for the better simply can't be underestimated, and there are lots of other examples of that. And right now in Tate Britain, there's, for me, a very moving exhibition, Women in Revolt. It's an exhibition of mixed media that follows women's activism and campaigning on everything from equal pay to war to advertising. It's a thoroughly worthwhile exhibition and only just down the road. It did provoke in me the thought, though, that there's still, compared to where we were in the 70s, we have come a long way in some regards, but there's still an awful long way to go. And the arts has a very big role to play in that.
My Lords, it's a great privilege to take part in this debate on the contribution of arts to the economy and society. Even more of an honour to take part in the debate led by the noble Lord Bragg. For most of my adult life, Lord Bragg has been the cultural advocate to follow, and one whose opinions on the arts, artists and the art world have shaped much of the national conversation. His contributions have made the arts accessible, helped us all to see its value rather than the artistic endeavour as remote, highbrow and elitist. And with others, he has argued the place of popular culture, a legacy surely to celebrate. In my few comments, I want to draw attention to the role that arts can play in regeneration, in particular in seaside and coastal communities. Living and running a coastal cities have inevitably shaped my view. In 2018-19, I chaired a select committee on the future of seaside towns. Our report painted a depressing picture of decline, of lost opportunity, of once thriving seaside communities feeling disconnected and left behind. Health and education, caring services, public transport, access to the arts and culture all had outcomes infinitely poorer than in our major cities. We charted this decline from the 60s, when many seaside towns lost access to the rail network and Brits with rising living standards changed their holiday habits. We concluded none of this was inevitable. The committee visited Cornwall, Clacton, Skegness, Blackpool, Whitby and Scarborough and Margate. We heard from councils, social commentators, cultural entrepreneurs, MPs, ministers, architects and regeneration experts, and most importantly, local people. In short, we listened to those with a passion for those communities and their potential. One thing came across strongly. The British people haven't fallen out of love with the seaside. Visitor numbers remain high. They just view the seaside and our coast in a different light. The successful coastal communities we visited had a strong cultural imprint, invested in the arts, education and culture. So, Margate, St Ives, Penzance, Scarborough and Falmouth had all taken a leap of faith, and it was evidently paying off. Take my own city. Back in the 60s and 70s, it was a semi-industrial tourist town in economic decline. But with the Brighton Festival and the arrival of higher education, the development of a College of Art, it has shifted from being Keith Waterhouse's town that looks like it's helping the police with their inquiries to becoming the place to be. Now it's full of creatives, art houses, art entrepreneurs, TV production companies, musicians, writers and performers. It has one of the UK's highest business formation rates, many of them linked to the arts and digital economy. The Brighton Festival and Dome and Royal Pavilion show an economic impact annually of some 60 million and support 1,200 jobs. It's an arts hub for the South. My Lords, is this a miracle cure for the seaside economy? Of itself, no. But it is part of the answer. The arts, as we've heard this morning, have high levels of productivity, can be open and accessible, deliver new skills, are at the cutting edge of new technologies. The UK, partly because of the brilliant advocacy of the arts by Lord Bragg, is a recognisable arts superpower. But just as decline is not inevitable, nor is success. The arts economy needs champions, risk-takers, well-shaped investment plans and a sense of national purpose. And it needs a government, a Labour government, that is confident, outward-looking, invests in winners and helps its arts exporters and celebrates and values our successes. Arts and cultural-led regeneration has enormous transformative potential. Just look at Dundee and the V&A's impact. But we need support, a framework of renewal and a national plan for improving the seaside that embraces that potential.
Lord Howarth of Newport is taking part remotely. I invite Lord Howarth to speak.
My Lords, I declare my interests as Chair of the National Centre for Creative Health, a charity independent of government, and as co-chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Arts, Health and Wellbeing. Since the APPG published its report, Creative Health, in 2017, the term creative health has become increasingly familiar in the worlds of healthcare, social care and culture. It denotes creative activities and approaches which have benefits for our health and well-being. Activities can include visual and performing arts, crafts, literature, cooking, and creative activities in nature, such as gardening. Approaches may involve creative and innovative ways to provide health and care services in healthcare settings, but also in homes, communities, cultural institutions, and heritage sites. My noble friend Lord Bragg referred to the important research by Professor Daisy Fancourt for the World Health Organization, demonstrating the effectiveness of creative health. Creative health may be used as a targeted intervention to support people living with specific mental and physical health conditions. It can be applied in people's everyday lives, supporting general well-being and reducing isolation and loneliness, and as a component of place and community-based approaches to population health, influencing the social determinants of health, the conditions in which people live, grow, work, and age. Some noble lords may recall that in our proceedings on the Health and Care Bill in 2022, when the Minister declined to set up a review of the efficacy and potential of creative health, I said we would do it ourselves. The report of the review, sponsored by the NCCH and the APPG, and led by a very distinguished group of commissioners, was published in December. It describes the current state of creative health in England and makes recommendations to government and metropolitan mayors. Greater Manchester and London are already well ahead with creative health strategies for their city regions. We call for a cross-governmental strategy to ensure that the power of creative health is fully harnessed to improve the health and well-being of all our people across the life course, to reduce health inequalities, to improve economic productivity, to reduce pressure and demand on the NHS, and to support the personal resilience of staff in the NHS and social care. If the potential benefits of creative health are to be realised, this is not just a matter for the DHSC and DCMS. We address recommendations to education, DLUC, justice, and other departments. We recommend, for example, better focus on creativity in schools and using creativity to improve working conditions and the planning and design of the built environment. Strategy to realise the full potential of creative health needs to be driven by number 10, with a new and sophisticated analysis of the economic benefits by the Treasury. My Lords, the report is available on the NCCH website. The report presents evidence that creative health offers value for money. Creative health interventions can lead to a reduction in healthcare usage. Mind Songs, Breathe In, Sing Out programme in Gloucestershire uses singing to support people with breathlessness resulting from COPD, asthma, or anxiety. They have seen a statistically significant improvement in mental well-being, a 23% decline in A&E admissions, and a 21% decline in GP appointment. Some integrated care systems, including creative health hubs in West Yorkshire and Gloucestershire, have incorporated creative health into their joint forward plans and established supporting infrastructure and funding and commissioning models that facilitate the sustaining development of community-based creative health initiatives. They have also collated consistent data to demonstrate the long-term impact on health outcomes and inequalities. The government should encourage and support such approaches all across the country. This requires a whole system approach endorsed and led by the government, including health systems, local authorities, schools, and the cultural and VCSE sectors.
My Lords, I too congratulate the Government on deciding to ratify the UNESCO Treaty on Intangible Cultural Heritage. And a big thank you too to Patricia Lovett, who has campaigned on this for so many years. Also, I applaud the Government's stated commitment to negotiate the artist resale right with other countries, which is much appreciated. However, the triumvirate of crisis areas, arts funding, arts education and Brexit are now causing firefighting on a daily basis in terms of cost, red tape and feasibility. My Lords, an artist's work is primarily a contribution to society, which is why public funding is so important. Visual artists, for instance, should be properly remunerated for participation in public exhibitions on the kind of scale that, for example, Stuttgart has recently announced for artists there. But compare that progressive model with Suffolk and Nottingham, who are just the latest councils to announce zero funding for the arts. There will be no exhibitions, let alone payment for artists, and theatres are now in danger of losing much of their total funding, as Lord Bragg's excellent introduction made clear. My Lords, I read with horror this week of the possible plans for a fast sale of public assets to deal with local authorities' financial woes, including buildings which might be used for arts and cultural purposes. This is so short-sighted. Councils have already lost many precious buildings that cannot be recovered. Local authorities ought to be part of the solution, rather than hindering the provision of, for example, our increasingly scarce music venues, which were mentioned earlier. The Arts Council and local authorities are blamed, but ultimately it is the long-term cuts to central government funding which are responsible. The key to arts funding lies in reversing the cuts to local authorities, particularly as through the Let's Create strategy, the overstretched Arts Council has taken on the kind of community projects that used to be funded by local authorities. My Lords, Brexit is yet to be properly addressed for the arts. While much can be done to ameliorate the situation, including renegotiating the kind of deal the EU originally offered us, in the end, the real solution must be to rejoin the single market. And I say this particularly because many of the jobs that used to be on offer in Europe to performers as an accepted part of their career path are now advertised only for those with European passports. We will always remain at a disadvantage to our European neighbours with respect to the creative industries until we are an equal member of that market again. My Lords, one specific thing the government could do to help touring musicians would be to speed up and reduce the red tape on the issuing of A1 forms. I have an oral question on this on February the 12th to be answered by the Treasury, but I take the opportunity here to ask the DCMS to impress on the Treasury the importance of addressing this concern. My Lords, the third main area of concern is arts education, with GCSE arts entries falling by a massive 41% since 2010. The key issue here are the accountability measures with their built-in hierarchy of subjects. Look to the recent report by the Lords Committee for Education of 11 to 16-year-olds that recommends the EBAC be scrapped and Progress 8 reformed. One should bear in mind that the EBAC was set up to cement the then Education Secretary, Michael Gove's vision of a narrowly academic bias to school education and not the properly rounded education that all students deserve and indeed would most benefit society.
My Lords, I declare my interest as a member of the board of the Royal Court Theatre. When I first got appointed to your noble Lord's house, one of my oldest friends' first reaction was, "Oh, wow, that's amazing. Does that mean you get to meet Melvyn Bragg?" I can't think of anyone else whose cultural appetite spans so widely, yet whose passion for them is always tethered to the values of incessant curiosity and intellectual rigour. And one other thing that I associate with my noble friend, Lord Bragg, is the belief that art and culture should be available to everyone, whatever their background. A statement that sounds trite, perhaps, until you unpack what it says about a country and a culture when it stops being true. It is rare that someone steps out and says, art should only be for the privileged few, of course. But the problem is that is precisely what happens in a country that lets the open democratic contract at the heart of arts and culture slip away. A country, sadly, a bit like ours. This is what happens when you see the arts not as a staple of what makes for a good life, but as a luxury that can no longer be afforded. The cherry on the cake misnomer, as our friend Lord Bragg said. It leads to nearly £1 billion cut from local government spending in the arts in the last 15 years, a real terms 30% cut in public funding for the arts since 2010. It's accompanied by a view that the arts is the plaything of the metropolitan elites. It tethers political grievance directly to our cultural institutions, to our media, whose integrity gets constantly questioned, to our arts institutions, who are portrayed as only enjoyed by the champagne swillers. And it leads to a culture minister appointed who didn't even know that Channel 4, one of her own party's boldest innovations, was not taxpayer funded. In education, it continues with the prejudice that science is an investment, but arts is a hobby, that arts and culture are a private good, not a public one. Arts courses at universities are repeatedly challenged for their economic value, for their academic merit, and even their political acceptability. These courses then, unsurprisingly, get whittled away. Cash-strapped and curriculum-overloaded schools become less and less able to offer supplementary arts and music options, or even core arts and music options for their students. And over time, the values, as many noble colleagues have said, of empathy, curiosity, sensitivity and openness become associated with elitism, privilege, weakness, and even being a snowflake. And what is the consequence of these financial and cultural chipping aways at the arts? It means children's access to arts is radically reduced. It means arts institutions' cuts that were temporary in bad times become the new normal. And it means that thousands of freelance workers who don't often get mentioned, who depend on the arts, find their careers totally unsustainable. No surprise then, and in Britain today, people who grew up in professional families are 4 times more likely than those with working-class parents to be working in the creative industries. One of our leading actresses, Dame Helen Mirren, warned that acting is becoming a preserve of the rich, and thus the prejudices of many of those who neglect and starve the arts are perversely vindicated. The price we all pay for this is not just young people with less exposure to the arts, less enriched by them, and it's not just growing inequality and access to what should be a daily staple for everyone in our country. It's also that the quality of our democracy is undermined, because our arts are at the heart of freedom of expression, solidarity, debate, and disagreement accompanied by civility. Arts make us all better citizens, which is why we all need access, continuing exposure, and participation in the arts. And more than anything else, this is why, whatever happens politically in the decade ahead, we must all, whatever our party and our preferences, call time on the neglect, the austerity, the politicisation and the prejudice towards our arts that I fear has become part of daily life in the past decade.
Very good.
My Lords, I too welcome this debate and thank the noble Lord Bragg for securing it. As a general point, I'd like to emphasise that the arts creative industries sector provide us with an important ingredient of soft power internationally. The status and recognition of the UK and its economy is based on a mixture of our history, the importance of the English language, our education system, and the BBC. But it is enhanced by the role of the arts, whether music, dance, theatre, or anything else that can claim inclusion in the definition. In this, the British Council has an important role, which I believe could and should be extended. But, my Lords, in the short time available, I'd like to concentrate my remarks on dance and classical ballet in particular. As a former co-chairman of the all-party parliamentary group for dance, a position now enjoyed by my noble friend Baroness Fraser of Craigmadie, I can point to the importance of the role of dance in education, health, well-being, discipline, and international relations, as well as in its sheer beauty and entertainment values. In recognising the importance of excellence and high standards in performance, and perhaps a perhaps less known institution, the Royal Academy of Dance, plays a vital role. Here I must declare an interest as a former governor of the RAD, which teaches the teachers of ballet, provides the syllabus and examination system, and maintains standards, and is recognised for this throughout the world. Indeed, I've come across RAD examiners working away in South Africa, in New Zealand, and even in El Salvador. In terms of culture, my Lords, the Royal Ballet has, of course, a leading role. Again, I should declare an interest as a former governor in the days when my late noble friend Lord Sainsbury of Preston Candover was the chairman. I was also privileged to attend the Royal Ballet School at the ripe old age of 10, so long ago that it was still known as the Sadler's Wells Ballet School. But the Royal Ballet, at its home in the Royal Opera House, represents a centre of excellence renowned throughout the world and a huge attraction for tourists and British balletomanes alike. And in talking about the Royal Ballet, let us not forget the Birmingham Royal Ballet, under the brilliant artistic directorship of Carlos Acosta and the safe hands of its CEO, Caroline Miller. The BRB delights audiences at its home base in Birmingham, but also brings joy and pleasure to the citizens of Southampton, Bristol, Plymouth, Sunderland, Salford, and elsewhere in its capacity as a touring company. We're fortunate in other companies, such as the English National Ballet and the Northern Ballet, to name but two, which are world-class, which are also world-class, I should say. All are struggling with budgetary restrictions. If I may raise a specific question for my noble friend, given the funding cuts we've been hearing about, the higher rate of theatre tax relief introduced in 2022, has provided a lifeline for theatre, opera and ballet. It's made it possible to invest in various productions, fostered innovations and supported employment for actors, dancers, designers, producers and stage crew who would otherwise be out of work. To take one example from the Birmingham Royal Ballet, it supported the highly innovative Black Sabbath, the ballet, which has last year thrilled sold-out audiences across the country, many of whom had never seen ballet before. The current rate of tax relief is due to end in 2025. Could this be extended? Such a move would be cheered across the performing arts sectors. Can my noble friend give me hope?
Yeah. My Lords, we get to the point in the debate where we defy the rules of just a minute and we have hesitation and repetition. However, I make no excuses for congratulating my noble friend and national treasure, Lord Bragg, on his lifelong commitment to the arts and to ensuring this debate. I refer to my register of interest, my Lords, 40 years as an actor before entering the theatre of politics, and I know full well what Lord Bassam and my noble friend Lord Rooker say about Seasides and the rural theatres. Indeed, I've performed the length and breadth of the countries and sometimes in theatres that wished I hadn't. But my Lords, I believe, now on a serious point, that our lack of a comprehensive art policy will fail a generation in this country. Therefore, my focus will be access to the arts, the creative industries in all their aspects, through education at primary, secondary and tertiary level, and physical access to experience the arts in all their interconnected forms. I am indebted to the Lord's Library Department and in particular to Nicola Newson for the detailed research I requested and to the briefings that I received from British Actors Equity. My premise is, my Lords, that we have no effective joined-up cross-departmental approach to one of our most successful industries. I would go so far as to revisit the concept of DCMS and instead make a case for education, arts, science and innovation. I believe without cross-departmental strategies, young people, especially from working class and ethnic minority backgrounds and people with disabilities, will be denied crucial, life-changing opportunities without regular access to arts and arts education and the careers therein. But, my Lords, it is not only young people that benefit, it is cross-generational. I have witnessed at first hand the impact of drama and art within the prison system, opening up minds, helping people to face the challenge of reading and writing and expressing oneself, and to face the deep and often damaging frustration that comes when people are unable to do just that, express themselves. The power, my Lords, of the arts to bring imagination to life and allow and encourage individuals to explore new, unimagined opportunities. The arts, all interconnected, television soap opera, music, television drama, theatre, opening audiences to the world around them, challenging misconception and misinformation, but all the time engaging and entertaining. And in fact, as mentioned by my noble friend, Lady McIntosh, bringing about a monumental change for justice, as witnessed by Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, and those of us old enough to remember the social justice that followed Cathy Come Home. However, my Lords, we are failing young people, as witnessed by the findings of a report by A New Direction, a not-for-profit organisation that promotes creative opportunities for children and young people. The report, Arts in School, Foundations for the Future, was published in March 2023, and it is still needing to be fully addressed by the government. We must assure that there is greater time to study and explore music, drama, design, dance, video, games, films, audio within our schools and hubs outside, especially for those who might not otherwise be able to afford it. We must keep our theatres, music venues and libraries open. They are not luxuries, they make economic sense, and they speak of the kind of civilised, open country that we are, or we could become.
Yeah.
My Lords, it's a pleasure to follow the powerful contribution of the Noble Lord Cashman and to join the universal thanks for Lord Bragg for securing this debate and introducing it so powerfully. I think it's worth focusing on the Noble Lord's key message, that the arts feed us. They are our physical, emotional and intellectual benefit, although I think rather than cake we should be looking at this as bread, as one of the staffs of life. Now, I want to focus on the importance of that staff being available to all communities, as did the Right Reverend Bishop of St Albans, noting, as the Bishop did, the near collapse of provision in Bedfordshire and Hertfordshire, particularly the collapse of the opportunities for people to participate in the arts. For the Green Party, that has to be the foundation of arts policy, not focusing on what people purchase, views of a Hollywood movie or blockbuster exhibitions, but what they participate in, what they are able to jointly co-create. And we know that it is of great public interest in the best sense. To take an example Noble Lords may be aware of, there's currently a giant furore around Suffolk County Council's decision to deliver a 100% cut to core arts funding. It's even penetrated the London-centric mainstream media bubble. Now, we have to acknowledge the long-term impact of more than a decade of government austerity on local government. I declare my position as a Vice President of the Local Government Association. The foundational blame lies here in Westminster. But the decision locally is still indefensible and has since, to a degree, been reversed, although the outcome's yet to be finalised. But a partial climb down by the County Council leaves hugely valued local institutions such as Dance East and the New Wolsey Theatre without the kind of certainty that's needed to securely continue to deliver hugely valued community services. The mother of 15-year-old Jack, who has autism, told Channel 4 how much a weekly drama class had brought him out of his shell. "I absolutely love them," Jack told Channel 4's reporter. Now, Noble Lords will be aware that I work across many issues in your Lordship's House. In health debates, we often hear from the government that it understands and values the contribution being made to increasing health by social prescribing, enabling people to access dance and theatre and other creative arts as a way of caring for people, improving their health and their lives. Yet here we have Ipswich, where a third of children are living in poverty, faces a collapse of such provision, something that can only put more costs onto our struggling NHS, taking away the essential food to set children up for a healthy life. Now, finally, I have to step away from my main focus to comment on the contribution of the Noble Lord Vasey, not currently in his place, and to disagree in the strongest terms with the Noble Lord about the relationship between BP and the British Museum. As the campaign group Culture Unstained said, this is completely indefensible. Greenwashing, art washing, they do not clean the hands of companies like BP, but they do damage the reputation, the standing, the world's view of institutions that enable that effort at greenwashing. And I comment further on the Noble Lord's embrace of philanthropy. Well, relying as a foundation on philanthropy to keep our institution going means a tiny number of people get a big say in the direction of those institutions, the subjects those institutions tackle, the kind of work they support. How much better to ensure that big companies and rich individuals pay their taxes and we all democratically decide how to allocate the funding. If we want arts that embrace, show the way to change, rather than simply seeking to reinforce the status quo, we need democratically decided funding for the arts.
My Lords, I join in thanking the Noble Lord Bragg for securing this debate, his powerful introduction to it, and as so well expressed by my noble friend Lady Mackintosh, his exceptional contribution to the country's cultural and artistic life. I had the privilege to introduce a debate on a similar subject a year or so ago. Depressingly but unsurprisingly, little has changed for the better since. The real reduction in public funding for the arts has continued to squeeze all institutions, and the Arts Council stumbles on in its attempt to distribute that inadequate funding in the context of admittedly incoherent directions from the government. All the while, and against the odds, artists of all disciplines in this country daily create miracles of inspired excellence. So, my lords, are we wasting our breath today? I was encouraged last night talking to the chair of one of the most important artistic institutions in the country from outside London, who welcomed our debate, saying, nobody else advocates for the arts, least of all the Arts Council. I declare my interest as disclosed in the register as Vice Chair of LAMDA. I strongly endorse the arguments made by the Noble Lord Bragg and every other speaker about the vital importance, directly and indirectly, of the arts to our lives. I wish to speak briefly on 2 points. The Noble Lord Bragg highlighted the huge divergence between the teaching of music and the performing arts in the state and independent school sectors. My lords, I see this vividly through the drama exams conducted by LAMDA, over 120,000 a year worldwide. But while LAMDA's world-leading drama school already draws its students from a broadly representative cross-section of society and works hard to improve that further, LAMDA exams are overwhelmingly taken by students from independent schools. A vivid but depressing illustration of the rundown of the teaching of the arts in state schools. My right honourable friend Sir Keir Starmer's commitment of the Labour Party to promoting oracy through state schools is a light at the not too distant end of the tunnel. I hope the Noble Lord the Minister, when winding up, will not again insult the intelligence of your lordships by presenting small nominal increases in funding for the arts, shrugging off the savage inflationary cost increases suffered by all arts institutions. Since the start of the Conservative and Conservative-led governments, public funding has been cut by over 30% in real terms. A year ago, I suggested that the additionality required for funding from the lottery might be relaxed, and that the doubling of distributions to good causes promised by the new lottery franchisee could be used to compensate in part for the real-term reduction in the Arts Council grant in aid. By coincidence, today is the first day of the new lottery franchise. Yet already the new franchisee has talked about struggling to match previous year's distributions and a delay in any increase. Would the Noble Lord the Minister agree that the award of the franchise to Allwyn by the Gambling Commission appears to have been based on a false prospectus? And if, as now predicted, lottery funding for the arts and other good causes does not meet the original projections on which the franchise was awarded, will the government make up the difference through an increase in the grant in aid?
My Lords, I too would like to pay tribute to the Noble Lord Bragg for securing this debate today. I refer the House to my interests as set out in the register, specifically my chairmanship of the Courtauld Institute, my co-chairmanship of the Prime Minister's Council for Science and Technology, and my membership of the board of the Royal Opera House. I'd like to make 4 short points. First, the arts do not exist in isolation. Rather, they're a prism through which everything else in our world can be viewed. That means that they must feature much more prominently in education and outreach programs. Successful examples can be found and built on at, for example, the Royal Opera House and at the Courtauld Institute, an institution which remains faithful to its founder's vision of art for all. Second, the arts lift our eyes up out of today's day-to-day preoccupations towards the broader human condition. For many years, I've been a patron of Paintings in Hospital, a charity which loans artworks to health and social care organisations, where they're displayed, reducing anxiety and therapeutically benefiting patients, staff and visitors. When I served as chairman of the Donmar Warehouse, I'll never forget speaking to a group of young people who'd been invited to the all-woman performance of selected works by Shakespeare in a warehouse near King's Cross. They'd never experienced the power of Shakespearean verse before, and they found that it spoke to them in a commanding yet fresh way about their own lives and the lives of those around them. We must do much more to open the arts to new audiences, widening access, and in the case of visual arts, expanding public display. Third, we should remember that the arts always give more than they take. The question of public funding should always be tested against the backdrop of the significant value added the arts make to the UK economy. Approximately £50 billion gross, a figure similar to that of the food and beverage service sector. This must be recognised with commensurate levels of public finance, but more philanthropy must be encouraged. For example, there must be scope for additional tax relief for smaller donations, commonly called individual giving, and for the lifetime donation of works of art, which should be incentivised and made much more tax efficient without a limit on total value. We should be recognising and encouraging generosity, not stifling it. Fourth, the arts are instrumental in creating our future. The research and development R&D growth potential of the world-class creative industries is enormous, yet they are often overlooked for investment. In the autumn, the Council on Science and Technology made a series of recommendations on how further to incentivise R&D activity that will have benefit across the arts, the creative economy and beyond. We called for increased levels of public finance, further tax relief opportunities, renewed efforts to value and digitise our cultural assets, and greater copyright protections for creative content in the face of AI deployment. We look forward to the government's full response. My Lords, I'm a firm believer in and a supporter of the arts in this country, but those of us who play an active role know that we can't take their continued contribution for granted. The benefits they bring to individuals, to society, and to the economy of today and of the future must not be overlooked, even in challenging economic times.
My Lords, a view from street level by someone who's never chaired very much or run huge organisations yet.
Well then, Les.
The late revered Michael Parkinson once declared that of all the interviews he'd done, his favourite was the one he did with Jacob Bronowski. Jacob Bronowski. Most of us will remember his groundbreaking television series, The Ascent of Man, which was broadcast almost exactly 50 years ago. Here was a scientist of the first order who was marinated in the arts. Human values, the work of William Blake, a writer of poetry himself, and such an engaging personality, what a cocktail of qualities he possessed. He championed the idea that the best science was simply the material and physical outworking of deeply implanted human instincts. The arts were as important to him as his science. From then to now, Jamie Brownhill is the headmaster of the Central Foundation School for Boys, a magnificent inner-city comprehensive in Islington. I was involved in its governance for 20 years, 10 of them as chairman of its trustees, but that's as grand as it gets. Ask Jamie about the history of his school, and he'll be bound to tell you how Jacob Bronowski is its most admired former pupil. This recognises the important place Bronowski plays in the school's past, but it's equally an indication of the spirit of the man still hovering over a community of learning which, for all the problems in our national education referred to by previous speakers, just now continues to live out the ideals of their former pupil. I visited an exhibition of paintings done by its pupils and put on in the Wellcome Foundation. I sat proud as punch at a concert in the Guildhall where a range of musical skills were on display. Our trustees kept agreeing to buy pianos for rehearsal rooms and music lessons, and the drama put on by the pupils was wonderful. How can I ever forget the way a 17-year-old Macbeth, just after stabbing the king, with the same facility of utterance he might have shown in wiping his hands after consuming a burger at McDonald's, lamented the way that this hand will all the multitudinous seize incarnadine. The arts must surely be at the very core of our curriculum, so that one generation after another can bring their creative, cultural, emotional, imaginative selves into the mix of their developing minds. It's vital for the well-being of society, as others have said, and for the building of the kind of world we all want to live in. Again and again, Jacob Bronowski made reference in his great work to poets, musicians, philosophers, artists, dramatists. He ended one of his chapters with a favourite quatrain of mine from William Blake. He wanted people to be able to see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower, to hold infinity in the palm of their hand and eternity in an hour. Or as I, in a pathetic contemporary version, might have it, to build a culture that's steeped in the arts, where STEM plus A equals STEAM, where the whole is more than the sum of its parts, and life rich beyond our wildest dreams. I salute my noble friend, a true companion of honour, and thank him for giving us the possibility of discussing this important subject today.
Well done.
Yeah.
Bloody good.
Thank the noble Lord Bragg for securing this important debate and for his excellent and powerful introduction. We have heard some very knowledgeable contributions today. My contribution is very different. Small children can express themselves through art with paper and crayons, a roll of lining paper and a pot of felt-tip pens, and they are away. Don't ask, what is it? But tell me about your picture. Have at least one contribution pinned up around the home somewhere. Plasticine and Fimo are also a great starting tool to encourage children. If talent is there, nurture, develop and encourage it. Art therapy and the use of drawing is often used in cases of children's bereavement or abuse to help them express what they are feeling, tell what happened when they don't have the words to do so. The digital age and computers have moved the pace on significantly towards graphic design. Advertisements and packaging are there to sell us something we did not know we needed or wanted, but this all helps the economy. The cultural aspect of the created industries is unquestionable. From deciphering the contributions of a 4-year-old to standing in front of a work of art from a grandmaster, our hearts and spirits are lifted, making us smile and sometimes cry. Art improves our mental health, keeping us going and economically active. Whether inside or outside, art has a part to play in the economy. We flock to see a play in a theatre. We save up to visit the Royal Opera House to see ballet, which is so transporting, or an opera, which is so dramatic, or we visit galleries which are calming and thought-provoking. A visit to the cinema gives a much better experience than viewing on the small screen at home, more convenient though this may be for many. Music calms the troubled soul, and there is nothing that comes close to the experience of a live concert. I return now to the younger generation, the classroom and the national curriculum, and other noble lords have referred to this. Art is squeezed out. Visiting theatre groups to schools lift the children out of their routine and give them a different aspect of life. Playing an instrument gives a great sense of achievement. Some art forms are more squeezed than others. Music, for instance. Drama, acting, painting get a reasonable allocation of time. Ballet tends to be after school and at weekends. Sculpture, not so good. Ceramics, craft pottery, reasonable. But if you might be the next Grayson Perry, someone will need to keep a foot in the door for you. Art foundation courses give limited time to various art forms. 2 weeks for clay is insufficient to discover if this might be your medium. All art forms need space on curriculums at all education stages in order to ensure they survive. There would undoubtedly be an effect on the economy of their disappearance, but the effect on the mental health of us all would be very significant if our art choices were restricted and some forms disappeared altogether.
My Lords, I thank my fellow peer, Lord Bragg, for introducing this debate. He's not in the House at the moment. I think he's out in the lobby being interviewed for the television. He cannot spread the message too far and too fast. I support his proposition that the economy of this country and the well-being of its people benefits both in money and in spiritual well-being from the flourishing of the arts. As for 10 years the BBC's arts correspondent, I documented week by week the talent and success, both reputational and financial, of our outstanding arts community. I'm repeating a lot that has already been said, but I think repetition only shows how important and universally these views are held. State funding since the war by central and local government has underpinned much of our success and continues to be subject to the vagaries of political volatility. Volatility. That's a word that we shouldn't need to use, and it would help if we didn't. Before that, I should mention the consistent donations made by private individuals and families in the UK. The Blavatniks, the Ruddocks, the Rousings, the Sainsburys, and indeed Lord Brown himself, who's just spoken. They are some of the most generous. But taking the broader picture, the UK arts depends on the state, both central and local government. And arguments in its favour are consistent and enduring. At the risk of repetition, here are some of them. The arts make money. They employ some 2.46 million people. They train generations to follow. The UK has some 275 arts colleges and arts courses at further education institutions. Many of their talents go on to enjoy international reputations in the world's galleries and museums. Soft power. The range of Britain's writers and its flourishing publishing industry are, as we have already heard, support our reputation in universities and in cultures around the world. Our musicians, composers, the popular music industry, more than hold their own in concert halls and on stages. A number of them have seats in this house. Our established artists who trained at any one of our 275 arts colleges command huge rewards on the booming UK arts market, currently worth £9.7 billion. For example, the paintings of the Scottish artist Peter Doig, who studied at Central St Martin's and at Chelsea, currently command prices towards £30 million a painting at auction. Then there are the personal and social benefits. You've already heard that spoken of several times. Millions of people visit hundreds of the UK museums and art galleries. Post the pandemic, theatre goers are now back at numbers like 16 million. More recently, research at Exeter University found that playing a musical instrument or singing in a choir can promote better memory skills and hence brain health in older age. Music is being used to help those with dementia. My lords, you already heard and will hear more arguments and examples of how the arts benefit the UK economy, its institutions, its communities, and its individuals. The arts are not a fringe activity for randomly filling in our leisure hours. Though they may do that for us individually, they are an ongoing conversation that this culture has within itself. And the government must take notice of that, back it, support it. How it comes to define its identity and nourish the lives of happiness and all who live here depend on the arts. And the arts depend on the government.
My lords, it's a pleasure to follow the noble lady Baroness Bakewell, who's done so much for the arts over such a long period of time, and equally to thank Lord Bragg for securing this debate. Again, national treasure, a hero, a legend of our arts in this country. In doing so, I declare my interest as set out in the register as member of the board at Channel 4. My lords, the arts excite, entertain, amuse, intrigue, shock, and yes, offend us, all to the good. What I'd like to talk about briefly is art's potential to make the difference. Not a difference, to make the difference, to cause change. And I'm reminded of a programme that the Lord Bragg made decades ago that affected me then and still is seared into my consciousness. It wasn't a big blockbuster budget. It wasn't filmed on location. It was across the way in a non-dressed, empty studio, 2 cameras, 2 chairs. The Lord Bragg on one chair, Dennis Potter, his life fading from him, on the other. Morphine flask in his hand. And in that moment, no set, no need for graphics or any other staging. In that moment, 2 humans discussing the power of art to change, to transform, to make the difference. And it's that essence that I've tried to take into some of the things I've been fortunate enough to be involved with. When I led the team that planned and delivered the London 2012 Paralympic Games, I was absolutely seized of the necessity to drive the artistic as well as the sporting, not least because for decades in this country, probably up to that point, sport and art had been put in some pathetic opposition. If you funded one, you couldn't have the other. Oil and water, never the twain. What nonsense. I hope that in our small way at 2012 we helped to drive that point home so it would never be seen by any future government that these were opposing forces. To put on Unlimited, the largest ever deaf and disabled arts programme ever staged on these shores. Great shows, great exhibitions, stand-up comedians, great performers, many of whom then led to be part of the opening ceremony of the 2012 Paralympics, so perfectly put together by the sensational Jenny Seeley and Brad Hemmings as directors. Shakespeare's Tempest running right through it, modern music, the national anthem signed as well as sung. And in the midst of all of this, Professor Stephen Hawking talking about not just possibilities beyond ourselves, possibilities beyond our universe. What gravity-defying, attitude-altering, opportunity-creating art and sport. All of it inclusive by design, all of it accessible for each and every person who experienced it. And it leads me to this just one question for my noble friend the Minister, of which I gave him prior notice. How many of our cultural institutions, our museums, our galleries, currently in receipt of national lottery and/or grant and aid funding, are not accessible? Not accessible, putting on inaccessible exhibitions and shows, but for the want of simple, accessible services such as audio description. It doesn't make a difference, it makes the difference for somebody being able to experience that art, that exhibition, or to be effectively and completely shut out. And in that we're talking about making the difference, not only to my noble friend the Minister, how many institutions are currently putting on inaccessible shows, what will he commit the government to do to put an end to this? My Lords, the arts, accessible for all. That's what we should all be aiming for. Accessible for all or not at all. Accessible for all, that's my clarion call.
My Lords, it's a great pleasure to take part in what's been a great debate, and I particularly welcome my noble friend Lord Bragg's very powerful and penetratingly relevant speech on the question of the arts today. He referred, quite rightly, to the chaos caused by the former Culture Secretary and by the English Arts Council to the English National Opera. And I want to refer in my short remarks to opera outside London, which has equally been affected by the decision of the Arts Council to reduce funding. The Arts Council was actually given 9% extra funding in the last settlement, but it has actually cut opera by 22%. Now, the effect in England and Wales outside London is on touring opera. Now, my noble friend Lord Rooker referred to the Mid-Wales Opera and the work that they do. But I want to refer to just 3 companies, because that's all we have, in England and Wales, which deal with touring opera. Glyndebourne Touring, Opera North, and inevitably, of course, the Welsh National Opera. The Welsh National Opera, despite its name, does a great deal of work in England. And indeed, a big part of its funding comes from the English funding council, as well as the Arts Council for Wales. And as a consequence of those cuts, we've seen cuts in performances. Now, the touring aspect of opera, those 3 companies actually go to 13 cities in England: Plymouth, Hull, Newcastle, Bristol, Southampton, Birmingham, Oxford, Milton Keynes, Canterbury, Nottingham, Liverpool and Manchester. And in all those cities, we are now seeing a reduction in performances. And here are the figures. The year before last, 146 performances. Now, 87. 10 years ago, there were 250 performances throughout England and Wales outside London. They speak for themselves. Now, if you compare continental Europe with ourselves, just 2 countries come out and explain the comparison. One is Germany, where there are 78 companies, and the other one is France, where there are 17. And Scandinavian countries, go through them all. All the countries in Europe serve their people better in opera than we do. And if we make it less accessible, if in fact we make it that performances are reduced, that production ceases in various parts of the country, you do then make opera elitist.
Exactly.
And in fact, opera shouldn't be elitist.
Absolutely.
It should be for everybody. And as a consequence of that decision by the English Arts Council, I think we're in dire trouble, and I think that the touring opera in England and Wales is now facing a crisis. It's the opposite of levelling up.
Yep.
And I think the Minister will, I hope, refer to these remarks in his wind-up, but I would ask him two things. Firstly, to liaise with his counterpart in the Welsh Government to ensure that the Welsh National Opera receives proper funding, and secondly, before the next funding round of the English National Opera, which I think is in 3 years, before that happens, and to save opera in our country, he directly deals with this crisis rather than leave it in the hands of the English Arts Council, which is not doing opera any good at all.
My Lords, I want to echo Lord Holmes's observation that Lord Bragg's contribution to all our individual experiences and recalling moments of contribution as he did with the interview with Dennis Potter, and I thought everyone in the chamber probably had some experience where we recalled where it made a real difference. But what I would like to urge members of my noble lords is to actually reach in your pocket, and you may still find some coins in there. And yes, we do still use coins. And I want to talk in particular about that when you hold in your hand a coin, you actually have a visible example, a real example of how the arts, design, innovative production methods actually contribute to the economy and reflect our society. Tokens which represent a value and underpin the assets of a nation and displaying the effigy of the sovereign have a very long history. And the Royal Mint in this country not only has a very proud past, but I think also a very promising history. And this may be a fitting moment to declare an interest, and in as much as I chair the Royal Mint's Advisory Committee on Coins and Medals, as well as being the president of the Birmingham Bach Choir, so a resident of music. But it really is the coins I want to talk a little bit more. The Advisory Council includes practicing artists and designers, and we make suggestions on lettering, heraldry, images and themes. And together with the in-house designers and their team, we aim to improve designing standards of our nation's coins and medals. And in that context, again, I would urge members to look at the next time they handle a coin, because they may just have one which has the new effigy of King Charles III. The effigy was designed by Martin Jennings, and even if you have not seen the coins yet, I think you probably have come across one of his public sculptures, either John Betjeman at St Pancras Station, and incidentally John Betjeman was a previous member of the Royal Mint's Advisory Committee, George Orwell at Broadcasting House, or the Women of Steel at Barker's Pool in Sheffield. The Royal Mint also encourages young talent, and a third of the Mint's design team is under the age of 30. One of the very earliest coins, which were celebrating the King's coronation, 50p coin, was designed by Natasha Jenkins, one of the local designers. And there are several initiatives to support craft skills and to encourage design and manufacture of the Royal Mint's jewellery range, and for that to be made in Britain. The first set of definitive coins of King Charles's reign were issued towards the end of last year, and they feature Britain's flora and fauna, celebrating the King's passion for sustainability and love of the natural world. £2 coin has floral emblems, £1 coin the industrial honeybee, 50p the Atlantic salmon, 20p the puffin, 10p the capercaillie, a woodland grouse, 5p an oak tree, 2p the red squirrel, and this is where it was very helpful that it was a copper coin, so it was clear that it's a red squirrel and not the grey squirrel we are celebrating, and the 1p the dormouse. The Royal Mint is also a very significant direct employer in Wales, and it supports its local area and the Welsh tourist industry through its award-winning visitor attraction, the Royal Mint Experience. But the main thing I want to stress, it promotes, protects and champions British craftsmanship and works with the Heritage Crafts Association and issues bursaries for precious metal workers, for example. It's a major contributor for exports, produces some billions of pieces for 22 countries. But its success, and this is the point of the art, its success is based on the simple fact, excellent designs, high-quality craftsmanship, innovative manufacturing, as well as the use of new technologies. The Royal Mint is expecting that it will be the first world-pioneering green technology which recovers gold from discarded electronic devices such as mobile phones and laptops to an industrial scale. The reason why I wanted to take part in this design today is simply that we should not overlook the importance of making things, valuing those things, and if those things are artistic, then we will appreciate.
It was good to see the Noble Lord the Minister on his first visit to Liverpool in November last year. I was surprised to hear it was the Noble Lord's first visit to Britain's premier city.
Oh.
I'm sure he will have been thrilled to find such a fine, vibrant city with deep cultural and artistic traditions that have given rise to a business community of talent across all the arts. The message from Liverpool is you don't need to go to London and experience artistic excellence. Liverpool is set on reversing the gravitational pull to the south. However, let's not forget the need for investment in infrastructure, the failing historic buildings that still need central funding. The port city and maritime industry was revolutionised through the creation of the Albert Dock, and after falling into dereliction, the area was transformed into a renowned cultural destination and has become a model of successful regeneration. But the fabric is now outdated. Liverpool Museums boast National Museums Liverpool on the waterfront, its Walker Art Gallery, World Museum, the Lady Lever and the Williamson on the Wirral, along with Tate Liverpool, are homes of natural art collections as well as modern and contemporary art in the north. Liverpool has recently been voted 7th best city of the world, and tourism is attributable to roughly 48% of the local economy, with a majority of visitors citing the dock and the museums there as the main reason to visit. But cost rise present huge challenges. Wage rises of 14%, energy bills increases of 100%, while DCMS grants have grown 4%. But great things are happening. Liverpool is committed to its waterfront transformational project. Both the Tate and the National Museums Liverpool have received 10 million each from the Levelling Up funding. Yesterday, the Wolfson Foundation announced a fantastic £1.25 million award to the transformation of Tate Liverpool. But certainty is certainly needed for the waterfront project. From the Minister's visit in November, can the Noble Lord the Minister say how his department is assessing financial support for the development of the International Slavery Museum and the Maritime Museum of National Museums Liverpool? Oh dear, lost my place. Not very good. I wanted to mention here the Bees project, which is a very innovative and immersive educational project outlining the importance of conservation and pollination that needs funding certainty, looking naturally to DCMS and DEFRA as contributors. I do apologise, my lords. Finally, I wanted to mention too the Liverpool Film Studio, arising from the regeneration of the iconic Littlewoods Edge Lane building. Is the Noble Lord the Minister able to encourage this in any way, being a new home for film in the north? Finally, I mentioned the John Moores Modern Art Prize at the Walker, the longest-running art prize open to all painters, trained and untrained, that has brought prominence to professional and emerging talent alike. I declare my interest as a trustee of this charity. Being at the leading edge, the show demonstrates the breadth of work across the UK in contemporary painting. And I'm glad that my noble friend Lady Beckwell mentioned Peter Doig, who was a past winner of the prize in his earlier years. All this provides excellence along with the musical tradition of the Philharmonic with the Merseysound, revolutionised in hosting the Eurovision Song Contest last year in place of Ukraine. This all provides evidence of the GVA to local enterprises through the promotion of the arts, and I wish the Noble Lord many more happy visits to Liverpool.
My Lords, can I add my thanks to the Noble Lord Bragg for this debate, and I hope I can say my noble friend Lord Bragg. And can I draw attention to my interest as declared in the Register? My Lords, all who have spoken have expressed a clear sense, led so eloquently by the Noble Lord Bragg, a clear sense of the true value of arts and culture and of the creative industries they spawn. What is needed, as the Noble Lord Cashman said, is to ensure that this value is properly woven into government policy, and they certainly are not at the moment. The funding system for the arts is broken, at central level, at local level, at Arts Council level. Central Treasury funding for culture has seen a 40% reduction since 2008. Alongside this, local authorities have also been subject to a 40% real-term reduction, which, due to the necessary prioritisation of statutory responsibilities, means that cuts have fallen disproportionately on arts organisations. My Lord, supporting local culture is not a cost, it is an investment. And here, having listened to the Noble Lord Basie, I've jettisoned the figures I was going to express, as he said that they were not to be listened to. Then there is the less tangible, the less measurable contributions, as mentioned by my noble friends Baroness Miller and Baroness Bakewell. Engaging in culture enhances individuals' lives, providing young people with opportunities to channel their creativity and energy, combating loneliness, combating both physical and mental health issues, as the Noble Lord Howarth so eloquently put it. Many people need statutory services because they've been deprived of what makes them feel good, been deprived of what the arts can provide them. Cutting funding for the arts, my lords, is a false economy in every sense of the word. And as Peter Bazalgette, I can't do an arts speech without mentioning Peter Bazalgette, former chair of Arts Council, says, the arts create empathetic citizens, putting us, through storytelling, in the shoes of others, and is society's glue, urging us to positive action. Witness, as the Noble Baroness Mackintosh has already mentioned, Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. I am a trustee of the Lowry in Salford, a prime example of the important contribution local culture makes to a community. Not so long ago, the Salford Quays was a place of derelict, disused docks. Now it's a thriving, creative hub. And what was behind this regeneration? An artist who inspired a gallery, and a performing arts centre with a great building, and with a mission to involve, include and inspire the local community, and, most important, a city council who had the foresight and the commitment to support this vision. And over the years, the Lowry has forged almost 30 community partnerships across Salford and Greater Manchester, and has contributed a deep, diverse and long-lasting impact on local lives through educational, volunteering and community engagement programmes. Will the Noble Lord the Minister please take note of the excellent LGA report, Cornerstones of Culture, which recommends a return to local decision-making when shaping cultural provision. And my Lords, this point of the importance of listening to local government and local institutions is exemplified by what happened in the latest Arts Council funding round. The Arts Council, set up by John Maynard Keynes, a very good Liberal and a very good economist, had as its first priority that while money for the arts came from the public purse, the independence of artists and arts organisations would be protected at all costs. And as Noble Lord Bragg so forcibly explained, this arm's length principle was destroyed by this government when ACE was issued a directive by a recent Secretary of State to redistribute funding from London to the regions as a part of the government's agenda for levelling up. Back to the Lowry. The National Theatre's commitment to touring and the Lowry's role as its home venue in the North West has meant that local audiences have experienced some of the most celebrated theatre productions of the last 20 years. But what is happening now? Exactly what those running provincial arts centres predicted. Deprived of resources, our national arts organisations have got rid of their touring commitments. They will inevitably become more entrenched in their London bases. The result could not be further away from levelling up. Does the noble Lord the Minister not agree that it is essential we return to the arm's length principle? As so many noble lords have said, the arts must be returned to centre stage in our education system. But STEM, not STEAM, has been the Conservative mantra, and the government persists, as the noble Lord Aberdare and Wood said, in supporting the EBAC, ignoring the fact that there should not be a choice between arts and science. Interestingly, the DFE recently announced that James Dyson has made a £6 million donation to build a science, technology, engineering and arts centre in a school in Wiltshire. Note the inclusion of arts. It is STEAM that he is supporting. Curious that the Secretary of State, in celebrating this in her press release, welcomes only that it is STEM. James Dyson was educated at the Royal College of Art before becoming one of our most successful inventors. Success that lies in the fusion of his creative and technological skills. And picking up on the noble Lord Bragg's point about the Industrial Revolution, it was this very fusion that the Victorians understood. They had a Department of Science and Arts. Sir Humphrey Davy, someone I've just learnt about, one of the most extraordinary scientific minds of that time, who discovered 9 elements of the periodic table, was a pioneer of the field of electrolysis, was also a poet. And in his fascinating notebooks, his poetry and scientific explorations are all muddled together, influencing each other. He lived in a time when there was no dividing line between the arts and science. There still shouldn't be. Doesn't the noble Lord the Minister agree? On which point will he let us know when the cultural education plan chaired by the noble Baroness Bull will be published, and will it have financial backing? On the matter of skills, the creative industries is a world of freelancers, and in some sectors this is as high as 80%. But the UK's tax and social security framework is not set up to effectively support freelancers. This means an alarming number of people are leaving the sector. It exacerbates inequalities in the industry, and in particular the loss of diverse talent. Does the noble Lord the Minister not agree that what is needed is a freelance commissioner, as recommended by the Creative Diversity APPG, of which the noble Lord Vasey and I are both members? And finally, my lords, there is the calamitous consequence of Brexit, as mentioned by my noble friend Baroness Garden and the noble Earl Clancarty. Issues with complicated paperwork, carnets, cabotage, visas, words, new words, costs. Music touring has gone up 30 to 40%, theatre by an average of 20%. Visual artists, not often heard, are also experiencing problems, as is fashion. It's all the same story. So much red tape involved in moving goods, in sales and exhibitions, in the freedom of movement of people. Does the noble Lord the Minister not agree with Lord Frost, our chief Brexit negotiator, and these are his words, that his trade deal failed touring musicians and other artists by inflicting punishing costs and red tape? Whoever is the next government, and here, like the noble Lord Bragg and Lord Kinnock, I do despair of this one, though not, I might say, the noble Lord the Minister, whoever is the next government needs to be as bold as Keynes was in 1946, the Arts Council, as bold as Jenny Lee in 1964, First Minister of the Arts, as bold as John Major in 1992, Department for Heritage and the first Cabinet post for an Arts Minister, as bold as Chris Smith in 1997, free museums and galleries. They need to stand up for the arts and culture for all the reasons the many speakers in this debate have mentioned. We need joined-up education and skills development, the reopening of negotiations with the EU, and joined-up funding and the return to the arm's length principle. John Maynard Keynes: the work of the artist in all its aspects is of its nature individual and free, undisciplined, unregimented, uncontrolled. But the artist leads the rest of us into fresh pastures and teaches us to love and to enjoy what we often begin by rejecting, enlarging our sensibility and purifying our instincts. And long may the creative industry, that is Lord Bragg, lead us in debates like this.
Very good.
My Lords, can I firstly thank the noble Lord Bragg, firstly for his choice of the subject today that he chose, secondly for his excellent introduction, but also for inspiring what has been a truly fantastic debate from across the whole House. My Lords, I have to say, I suspect his career is not one that he ever envisaged as he was growing up that he would have. We all remember the South Bank show, but when he joined your Lordship's House in 1978, it was felt there could be a conflict of interest and he should be sidelined into a quieter radio slot with a new programme called In Our Time. That worked, didn't it? My Lords, this is a wonderful programme. It's delightfully curious about everything and anything, and however intellectual the subject, it is never pretentious or boring, just like him. He isn't pretentious and boring, I'm hasten to add. For over 1,000 episodes, it has gently educated through conversation on the widest range of subjects. My Lords, the strength of this debate has been its depth, its breadth, and the range of cultural issues that we've debated today. I have to confess, my Lords, I have never enjoyed opera, but despite the best efforts of my comprehensive school, who gave us the opportunity to experience the arts, and I retain that love of music, of drama, of theatre and literature. I did think, though, it was a bit harsh when I became the Culture Minister in Northern Ireland, when the Irish Times wrote, I only paraphrase gently, that what hope was there when her favourite programme was Coronation Street. My Lords, this debate is everything I thought it could be, from music to theatre, TV and film to museums, to libraries and galleries, books, poetry, from dance and drama. The ability to give expression to emotions, to educate and inform, and to reach beyond superficial divisions that allow us to unite and bring communities together. And never to be underestimated, these are industries that give us pleasure and support our well-being. But also, the noble Lady McIntosh raised this, they bring power to move us. After years of campaigning, including questions and speeches in Parliament, some brilliant journalism, an excellent BBC documentary, why was it that it took an ITV drama about the post office scandal to capture the imagination of the public and force action in a way that totally committed efforts of others hadn't done? And partly it was because of the brilliant writing, production, acting. It made us invest our emotions in those characters. We empathised, we were outraged, it gave us insight, and it led to action. And it wasn't for the first time, but this was on an extraordinary scale, as was Jimmy McGovern's Hillsborough drama, and as Lord Cashman said, Cathy Come Home. Telling a true story through drama can breathe life into something we know about, but we haven't felt. My Lords, this debate ranged a wide number of issues, and lots of concerns were raised, both about funding and the pipeline of talent. The noble Lady Thornton spoke about how young people can be engaged and enthused by museums and theatre. We heard a lot from Lord Aberdeen, the Bishop of Albans and others about the role of music in health, in the growth of community choirs, for example, how they're bringing people together. I'm one of those people who benefited from school music lessons. I'm not sure my neighbours agreed, as I was allocated the trumpet to play at the time. But those opportunities are fewer and further between today. And I was really struck by the comments from the noble Lord Berkeley and Baroness Rebuck about books and libraries, and the figure she gave of £14 million to reinstate school libraries in primary schools is one that we'd all heed. But many of us, I'm sure I'm not alone, still recall from an early age going to the local library, having to beg the librarian to be able to use the adult library because you've read all the books in the junior library. And today, one of my great pleasures is at weekend browsing around bookshops. Much as I love my Kindle, there's nothing that replaces that hard copy of a book, and they all contribute. And I have to say, the comments from my noble friend Lord Bassam and Lord Grantchester and others about the role of the arts in regeneration for our communities, that economic role, is vitally important. And my lords, how many other industries have this reach across so many other areas of society? It's hard to think of anything else. And if we've heard from many, but we too often underestimate, the arts and culture industry is probably the most highly productive non-financial sector in the economy. Book publishing and artistic creation lead the way, but our museums and galleries of performance arts make a significant contribution. We've heard that the industry does receive some public funding, but it more than pays that back. The Centre for Economics and Business Research calculated that a total of £3.4 billion was paid by the industry in VAT, corporation tax, income tax and national insurance. That's many times more than approximately just over £400 million that some cultural organisations received from Arts Council England. Such funding has to be seen as an investment. It's not just a grant, as Noble Lord Vasey and Kinnock said. And my lords, the TV and film industry certainly plays its part. The 2023 annual census by the Producers Alliance for Cinema and Television revealed that the TV sector revenues, as they recover from the pandemic, increased by over 20% in 2022 to nearly £4,000 million. And that's despite the difficult economic challenges faced, but it's largely due to the world-class skills of our production teams. And my lords, in celebrating that contribution which inspires and entertains us, we have a duty to look at how we can support and protect those working in the TV and film industry. There are many issues affecting those that work in the wider creative arts industries. And I know from the 10 years that I chair the Production Exchange charity, very few earn large salaries. They're self-employed and contractual work can be erratic, and for many there's little job security. And there are serious health and safety issues to be addressed. I want to thank the TUC, the trade unions Bectu and Prospect, and I'm especially grateful to the Mark Milsom Foundation for the information and advice they have provided. Mark Milsom was well known in the film industry as an experienced, inspirational, innovative and talented cinematographer. The films on which he worked are known to all of us. Little Voice, 4 Weddings and a Funeral, Brassed Off, The History Boys, Constant Gardener, many, many more. In 2017, he was killed in Ghana when a stunt he was filming went horribly, tragically and fatally wrong. 3 years later, in his ruling of this as an accidental death, the coroner declared the risk of Mr. Milsom being harmed or fatally injured was not effectively recognised, assessed, communicated or managed. My lords, that's shocking. And it's devastating, as it's clear it could and should have been prevented. For many in the film and TV industry, the work may also be their passion, but it's still a job, and they deserve no less consideration because of that. Mark's case is not an isolated one, but it is one of the most serious. So I pay tribute to his family and his colleagues and friends who have set up a foundation in his name to help protect others. 3/4 of those that work in this industry said that their safety or that of a colleague had been compromised. Most of the reported incidents wanted to remain anonymous for fear of losing future employment, and too many people have responsibility for health and safety do not have the necessary qualifications or experience. Yet, because of cuts, the Health and Safety Executive today has 500 fewer inspectors than in 2010, so in fewer inspections, fewer notices issued that would lead to improvements being made, and that has a direct and possibly disproportionate impact on the Arts Centre. There is likely to be an HR department on specific projects, or producers have the training to be fully competent to do risk assessments. Those that work in this industry that brings us so much pleasure deserve better. And sometimes, my lords, small changes can bring about great improvement. And we ask ourselves these questions, and I'm sure the Minister and I hope to discuss this further. Could this be addressed through more effective monitoring inspections, or is fresh guidance and legislation needed? Are the existing training requirements adequate? How are they assessed? And why can't it apply to UK staff employed in the UK but working in other countries? So it's not just about money. So much effective work could be done in terms of the above issues, and the will, commitment and support from both the industry and government could make a real difference and save lives. And I hope it will be possible for the Minister and I to meet with the campaigners to discuss this. My Lords, this has been an amazing debate, but we expected nothing less. The Noble Lord Bragg at the beginning made it clear that our support and the contribution made for the arts was not just the cherry on the cake, but it's integral and central to all that we do. The Noble Lord Wood talked about public good, and the Noble Lord Kinnock warned us against the national cultural complacency. Today, we have heard across the House from all corners of this chamber the ambitions we have for our British artists, our performers, our writers, our painters, a whole range of areas. So I was asked earlier today, what did I hope for from today's debate? And I said what I'd like to see is that we kickstart a new national renewal of commitment of how we use the arts across every part of society, whether it's in regeneration, whether it's in drama, but in every way that we contribute to well-being and the economy. And it's moving from away from warm words to have a sit and just saying we want an analysis of what's good. But I think, my Lords, we can use this debate to kickstart that, to have a real sense of what can be achieved from the ambition of those who work in our creative arts and with our support. And, my Lords, I think the Noble Lord Bragg has done this House a great service in this debate today.
Well, my Lords, I join very happily in the tributes that have been paid to the Noble Lord Bragg today, not just for securing this debate in the way that he introduced it, but for a life and career devoted to championing the arts and their transformative power. The Noble Lord's contribution to the arts in this country is indeed unparalleled. His work on the South Bank Show has left an indelible mark on our cultural landscape, and he's inspired legions about topics they didn't even know they didn't know about through more than 1,000 episodes of In Our Time. He is a living embodiment of the power of the arts in the way that he sets out in the terms of his motion today, but also directly on people's lives. They are what have borne him, as the BBC profile of him on his 75th birthday put it, from Wigton to Westminster, and how glad we are that they have. The great turnout that we've had today, I think, are a recognition of that. Another Noble Lord who I know would have joined us had she not lost her voice is my noble friend Lady Sanderson of Welton, and her voice is certainly heard loud and clear through the Independent Review of Libraries published last month, which I commissioned of her, and which I hope the Noble Lord Berkeley of Knight and the Noble Baroness Lady Rebuck and others who rightly mentioned the importance of literacy and reading have had the chance to see. It will inform the government strategy for libraries for the next 5 years. I think it's important to start by reflecting on art for art's sake. When I go to the theatre, to the opera, to a gallery, I rarely take my seat thinking of the social benefits accruing to me by being there, or of the economic impact of the drink that I buy at the bar, or the magnet I buy in the gift shop. I'm thinking about what I've seen, what I've witnessed, how I've been challenged, how I've been moved, how I've been changed by the experience. The Noble Baroness Lady Mackintosh rightly extolled the power of Mr. Bates versus the Post Office, a TV drama which has moved and motivated us in the way that so many column inches and debates in Parliament have not. So while the economic and social impact of the arts are vital, the reason that I personally am proud of the way that this government supports the arts and culture is because they are an essential part of what makes life worth living. Governments should be confident in helping people experience that. It's also why, for me and the Secretary of State, excellence in the arts is so vital, because we believe that the unique and life-enriching quality of the arts are at their most potent when they combine creativity, talent, skill and rigour to create truly excellent cultural experiences. Undoubtedly, excellence comes in many forms and can look different in different places, but whatever the context, we should never be ashamed of aiming high. To that end, I agree with what Noble Lords have said about both the English National Opera and the Welsh National Opera and the excellent work that they do both on and off stage. I won't go all the way that the Noble Lord Murphy of Tofine advocates and tell the Arts Council in either England or Wales which organisations precisely they ought to fund. When I became Arts Minister, it was impressed on me very clearly how important the arm's length principle is, that ministers shouldn't decide who gets what, however deserving. I agree with the Noble Baroness Lady Bonham Carter about its importance. That unenviable job is done by the Arts Council itself. The government does the macro and they do the micro. I've acknowledged before that the instruction that we gave them before the last funding round to ensure that their funding is more equitably spread around the country made their job harder and presented them with some invidious choices, but I am proud that it has resulted in a record number of organisations being funded in more parts of the country than ever before, including, as the Noble Lord Rooker rightly mentioned, in rural parts of England. I visited Pentabus Theatre Company just outside Ludlow, which does brilliant work telling the stories of rural England with audiences around the country. And our forthcoming review of the Arts Council allows us to ask some of the structural questions that are important about how it makes its decisions, how it sets its strategy, how it measures them, and the timeframes by which government asks them to do it. And I hope Noble Lords from all corners of the House will help us inform that review. Notwithstanding the inherent cultural value of the arts, however, their economic and social impact cannot be ignored. And at a time when decision makers are looking at budgets in all sorts of contexts, be that philanthropic givers, corporate sponsors, or colleagues in the devolved governments and in local authorities, they would all do well to be mindful of the benefits that have been set out so clearly today. I spoke to a number of local authority leaders about this matter only yesterday, and I paid tribute to groups, including the Campaign for the Arts, to keep them and us all on our toes. Let me turn first, as the Noble Lord Bragg did in his opening speech, to the economic role of the arts. It's not by chance that economic growth is one of the key themes identified by the government's Creative Industries Sector Vision, published last summer. As we set out in that document, over the last decade, the creative industries output has grown more than 1.5 times as quickly as the economy overall, and its workforce has grown at almost 5 times the UK rate. The first goal set out in that vision is for the creative industries to add an extra £50 billion in gross value added by 2030. The second goal addresses one of the key enablers of that growth, its workforce. The vision makes clear that we want to ensure that our creative workforce embodies the dynamism and talent of the whole UK while addressing skills gaps and shortages. And the arts are a vital part of that mission. In 2022, the arts sector contributed £9.5 billion in output to our economy. That was a sharp rise from £7.4 billion the year before. We also saw increases in the workforce for the arts sector too, which has grown at over 3.5 times the rate of the UK's as a whole over the last decade. There are, however, important skills gaps and shortages that we must address to optimise its productivity, including those in technical roles across our creative and cultural venues. In part, that's because of the great demand for prop makers, set designers and technical professionals of all sorts in our booming film and television sectors, but these people are vital to our live performing arts. The Department for Education's Skills Bootcamp funding, both at national and local level, is one part of our work to address this, as is our work to ensure that parents, teachers and guardians have access to helpful and up-to-date careers guidance to inspire people to pursue these enriching careers. During the pandemic, as my noble friend Lord Vasey of Didcot set out, the Cultural Recovery Fund, more than £1.5 billion, supported thousands of organisations and venues across the land, helping to preserve the environment in which so many creative professionals work. The evaluation of that unprecedented fund estimated that organisations supported by it worked with more than 200,000 employees and freelancers. And the impact on growth goes further. Creativity might not be unique to arts and culture, but it's certainly where it's most prized and cherished. And creativity is at the heart of innovation across our economy, as the noble Lord Kinnock rightly said in his contribution. The skills and attitudes to innovation which are incubated in the arts can spill over happily into the rest of our economy. So we should applaud the arts and creative industries not only for their own output, but for also how they make us more creative, productive and globally competitive in so many other industries. As the Noble Lord Bragg said, they are not the cherry, they are the cake. But as many noble lords have pointed out, the impact of the arts goes far beyond their pure economic value. That's why the third goal of the creative industries sector vision is to maximise the positive impact of the creative industries on individuals and communities, on the environment and on the UK's global standing. We start from a good foundation. People engage with the arts in the UK on a very wide scale. According to DCMS's participation survey, more than 4 in 5 adults engaged with the arts in the previous year, a powerful demonstration of how the arts remain an integral part of our national life. And it's clear that this engagement has a positive effect on people's lives, improving their health, their education and their well-being. A key social impact of the arts is its positive impact on our health and well-being, including its use as a non-medical intervention through the growing work on social prescribing. A recent study involving more than 1,100 people aged 40 and above by the University of Exeter found that playing a musical instrument or joining a choir is linked to better memory and cognitive skills in older age, particularly from those suffering dementia. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had the opportunity to attend a reception for paintings in hospitals, hosted by the Right Reverend Prelate, the Bishop of London, here in your Lordship's house in the Cholmondeley Room. And the Noble Lord Brown of Madingley was there and spoke proudly today of his role as a patron. I'm glad that the Noble Baroness Lady Bakewell recognised his great generosity, not just financially, but through time and the expertise which he brings to so many organisations in the arts in this country. But Paintings in Hospitals does wonderful work, loaning artwork to and running art projects and workshops in health and social organisations across the country. Likewise, Arts Council England, in partnership with the National Academy for Social Prescribing and others, set up the Thriving Communities Fund, which has supported many initiatives to increase social connections and provided a great boon to many during the pandemic. Many more arts organisations across the country are doing fantastic work in this field. The Noble Lord Bragg talked about the transformative impact of the arts on my home city, Newcastle. The Laying Art Gallery from Newcastle, whose work I had the pleasure of admiring in 10 Downing Street earlier this week. They are this year's museum in residence at number 10. Deliver a hugely powerful service to the community on Tyneside through their Meet at the Laying project. The sessions that they run offer an opportunity for people to socialise, to overcome loneliness and to boost their well-being every month by exploring a different aspect of the art in that gallery over a cup of tea. On the other side of the Tyne, I visited Northbourne Care Home in Gateshead during Arts in Care Week in September over a delicious cup of coffee in their pop-up coffee shop. I saw how arts and creativity were helping the residents there and their families, both physically and mentally. And last year we saw the launch of the National Creative Health Associates programme, supported by the Arts Council and the National Centre for Creative Health, whose chairman, Lord Howarth of Newport, I'm glad, took part in our debate today. Many noble lords spoke of the powerful impact that the arts can have on children and young people. That's why it's so important that we ensure that children and young people have access to high-quality cultural education and creativity inside and outside school. I am one of the 93% and very proudly educated in the state sector, which is why I want to ensure that everybody has access to the opportunities which are so often illustrated on the posters and in the adverts for private schools. The government's refreshed National Plan for Music Education, The Power of Music to Change Lives, informed by a panel chaired by my noble friend Lady Fleet, aims to level up musical opportunities for all children and young people. As part of the commitments that we made alongside that plan, £25 million of new funding is being made available to purchase hundreds of thousands of musical instruments and equipment for young people, including adaptive instruments for pupils with special educational needs or disabilities. The refreshed plan also renews our commitment to the Music Hubs programme delivered by the Arts Council, providing £79 million a year. Looking ahead, we intend to increase the opportunities for all children and young people in culture more broadly, including, as the Noble Baroness Lady Garden of Frognall rightly highlighted, in heritage crafts and skills. In the coming weeks, the Cultural Education Plan, being shaped as we speak by a panel chaired by the Noble Baroness Lady Bull, will set out a blueprint for the way in which government and its partners can work together to improve cultural education across the country for all children and young people. The plan is intended to highlight the importance of high-quality cultural education and to promote its social value, to support career progression pathways, to address skills gaps, and to tackle disparities in opportunity. I've attended a number of the panel's discussions so far, and I'm grateful for the work that they're doing to encourage us to be ambitious for the lives of young people. An arts education fosters creativity, critical thinking, and emotional intelligence. It cultivates a space where young minds learn to express themselves, to develop a sense of self, and to appreciate diverse perspectives. Moreover, arts education nurtures the skills which are essential for a dynamic workforce, producing minds capable of critical thinking and adaptability. They're not things that any country should take lightly, and certainly should not take for granted, which is why cultural education is such a priority for the Secretary of State and for me. While an arts education plays an important role in developing individuals, we know that it has a wider impact on society. The Arts and Place Shaping Evidence Review, for example, commissioned by Arts Council England and published in 2022, points to a body of evidence that demonstrates how arts and culture-led regeneration and investment can help to promote social cohesion and civic pride. Alongside this study, other research, including the McKinsey study mentioned by many Noble Lords today, has testified that cultural participation can contribute to social relationships, community cohesion, and making communities feel safer and stronger. Its impact depends not only on the individual efforts of artists and arts organisations, but also on the whole ecosystem: creators, educators, distributors and promoters, suppliers, funders and audiences. To that end, and in line with the challenge rightly posed by the Right Reverend Prelate the Bishop of St Albans, we're delivering a number of programmes to help communities across the country to extend and improve their arts and cultural offerings. The £4.8 billion Levelling Up Fund, for example, invests in local infrastructure projects which improve life for people across the UK, focusing on regeneration, transport, and supporting cultural, creative, and heritage assets. The second round of the fund, announced last January, included over £500 million of support awarded to 31 culture and heritage-led projects. The Noble Lord, Lord Aberdare, is right to talk about the infrastructure of live music venues. My colleagues and I have been pleased to meet with the Music Venues Trust, and I hope the Noble Lord has seen the £5 million which was given alongside the Creative Industries Sector Vision to support grassroots music. Since its launch in 2019, over 3 rounds of funding so far, the Cultural Development Fund has supported a number of other culture-led regeneration projects. The successful recipients of the third round, totalling over £32 million, were announced last March. Recipients were spread across the country from Yorkshire to Devon, fuelling projects which will make a real difference to local people. And just yesterday, I launched the 4th round of the Cultural Development Fund with another £15.2 million available to support transformative projects across England. I warmly encourage people to apply. My noble friend Lord Holmes of Richmond spoke proudly of his role during London 2012 in fusing the sports and art, and spoke passionately as well about making sure that they are open to people whatever their needs and background. I'm very grateful to him for doing so. Both my department and the Arts Council are committed to ensuring the accessibility of our culture and our heritage across the UK for everybody, whatever their background, whatever their needs. The Arts Council has done excellent work in recent years to widen access. As part of its national portfolio, it's supporting a range of organisations striving to improve access, from Attitude is Everything, which seeks to connect people with disabilities with music and live events, and Vocalise, who work with arts organisations across the UK to remove barriers to access and inclusion for blind and partially sighted people. More broadly, in its new portfolio, the Arts Council is supporting an increased number, 32 organisations led by people with disabilities. And the government's Museums and Estates Development Fund supports physical adaptations to buildings to make them more accessible to everybody. I'm grateful to the Noble Lord, Lord Grantchester, for recalling my first visit to Liverpool. I'm ashamed it took me 40 years to make it, but I was delighted that when I went, the Beatles were at number 1. It was a delight to see him at National Museums Liverpool. I know he supports that arm's length body of the DCMS wholeheartedly. My officials continue to talk to the team there about their exciting plans, which I was delighted to see for myself, as well as with our colleagues at the Department for Levelling Up and at the Treasury. I'm very happy to meet the Noble Baroness Lady Smith of Basildon and the campaigners that she mentioned who are working to ensure that everybody's able to play their full parts in the arts and the creative industries, and to do so safely. I'll be happy to do that. We heard a great number of thoughtful views today from Noble Lords. I don't think we are in any disagreement about the inherent power, economic value or social impact of arts and culture in the UK. Happily, this has been, for the most part, a non-partisan speech, as exemplified by the pantheon of cross-party heroes listed by the Noble Baroness Lady Bonham Carter in her winding speech. I must take slight exception with the Noble Viscount Lord Chandos. I mean, we've had a number of exchanges before about the increased grant and aid provided by the government to Arts Council England. I hope Noble Lords know I would never seek to insult their intelligence, and I certainly wouldn't get away with doing so. I have acknowledged before that the increase of more than 43 million which we provided to the Arts Council in the most recent spending review is hampered by the rise in inflation. That is why the government is working to bring inflation down and why we have halved it. But it stands in stark contrast to the cuts in arts funding being proposed by the Labour government in Wales of nearly £3 million and more than 10%. And I hope that the Noble Viscount would take exception to those. But as expected,
Then I can tell the Noble Lord is coming to a close and there are a couple of minutes left. I really would very much appreciate it, and I'm sure that his noble friend Lady Hooper also would, if he would in passing at least address the question of theatre tax relief. It's a very serious matter for the arts sector, and I hope he will address it.
I certainly will, and I have it next on my list to do. I talked about it with orchestral leaders at the Association of British Orchestras in Bristol last week. We speak about it regularly with museums and theatres as well. That my noble friend is right to talk about the importance that it is, the way it is encouraging innovation, encouraging risk-taking, new writing, new productions and tours. We're very glad to have secured at the last budget the extension that we did. We continue to feed all of the evidence of the shows such as the Black Sabbath, the ballet, which, like my noble friend, I had the pleasure of seeing, to our colleagues at the Treasury to show the impact that is making. The new productions, the new jobs, the new enjoyment that it is bringing, and to measure that in a Green Book compliant way so that we can make the strongest case for those tax reliefs and the impact that they bring. But I hope Noble Lords will see that those extensions secured at the last budget, the funding through the Levelling Up Fund, the Cultural Development Fund, the work we're doing through the Cultural Education Plan and the National Plan for Music Education are parts of the ways in which the government, like all the Noble Lords who've spoken in today's debate, agree wholeheartely with the sentiments that the Noble Lord, Lord Bragg, put forward in his motion. We're very grateful to him for giving us the important opportunity to have today's valuable debate, and I'm grateful to all the Noble Lords who've taken part in it.
Thank you very much. I'm making a very short speech. I've got a very small amount of time, and it suits me because I've enjoyed listening to other people. It's been such a pleasure. All over the House, the support for the arts. And there's well thought through information. People are coming at it not with swipes of prejudice, but having looked at their own experience personally, looked at their own experience in the places where they live and historically. If we know one thing after this debate, it's that the House of Lords is firmly on the side of the arts, of digging into it, of developing it, of seeing it in its rightful place in society. All we've got to do is to convince the rest of the country. I just had a good time. I mean, I've just been... Look, you don't often go down the street and see so many people you admire and like saying all the things you want to listen to. But I had that experience today. I want to single out one person, that's Baroness Smith, who encouraged me to do this, and I was very nervous, actually. I hadn't been in the House one way or another for one reason or another. But she couldn't have been more helpful. and more firm. Right up to the last minute, I felt that almost I was going to be followed into the chamber with her tagging my heels. And there's one more thing. But it was wonderful working with you. So thank you, everybody. I think it's a great thing you've done for the arts, and I think it will move things forward. I hope so.
The question is that this motion be agreed to. As many as of that opinion will say content.
Content.
The contrary, not content. The contents have it. Repeat of a statement made in the House of Commons yesterday. Northern Ireland Executive Formation. Lord Kane.
Very